will be good because you'll like answer questions, but then you'll be like, Bob, we're like, Bob, what do you think about it? You know, and then like, so you both can like feed off each other or whatever. That's so cool. It'll be kind of like the baller thing with Digger Skeptic.
Oh!
All right. I had to fix that little issue there. I don't know if Bob knew that we were live or what was going on. Everybody can hear me? No idea what that is. Anybody know what that sound is?
Not Bob?
No, he's muted. All right. I had to fix that little issue there. I don't know if Bob knew that we were live or... Okay, now I get it.
Holy crap. Jared, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I do. That was weird because I was getting this loop of audio going around in circles.
So was I think because there's a delay, which I did not know about. So make sure your volume is down on the YouTube channel. Something I just learned. I kept hearing myself and then hearing you, and then I was lost, but I think I fixed it. So let's see here. Some people are saying they're getting feedback, so I'm just kind of checking here what everybody... How is it now, guys?
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I've got it down, and I'm wearing headphones.
Okay, me too. So I'm just seeing how everybody in the chat thinks it's coming along now. I didn't know that there's such a delay. Never knew that.
Dad,
Okay.
you're signed in under your personal.
And can we see the chat in here too, or this is just for you and I? Okay, that's just for you and I. So the chat is from here. You hear perfect? All right, thanks, guys. Sorry about that. Like I said, this is my first time using the Google Hangout, so give me a second just to make sure everything is good.
Okay, and I think I figured out what was causing that, Jared.
Okay, what was it? Something I need to fix, or?
Well, no, I was on headphones, but I had the YouTube feed going on, and it wasn't muted on that speaker. So
oh, got you. Okay, I think that we're good now.
I think so.
Let me see here. Okay, let me see. Making sure everybody hears it good. Excuse me. So everybody hears it good now? Are we without feedback and at a decent audible level?
Okay. It says
Okay,
it's
that's good.
all good. Excellent.
Beautiful. All right, guys. Well, thanks for stopping in. And I did this because I hope to start doing something like this on a weekly basis, basically picking a day and kind of scheduling it. So, Wednesday nights at 7 or something like that. So hopefully within the next week, I'll come up with a day that works for me every week so that we can start doing this regularly. And then also just an easier way for me to answer some questions. I'm having a tough time getting to all the comments on the videos, so I want to make sure I get to answer you guys' questions, especially when they're directed at me personally, and when I see them 3 days later, I feel bad. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody hears me good. Okay, that looks good. And then also wanted to see if anybody had any questions about the test that we're going to do tonight. Usually seems like a lot of people have questions about it. So also opening that up. And if you guys have a question, feel free to type it out there in the chat. Try, if you would, to either capitalize my name or something, colon, and then the questions, just so I can kind of see it. And my wife will be up here in about 15 minutes, and she's going to be able to read some of the questions. So thanks, Joseph. Appreciate that. So the light, just to let you guys know what's going on with the light and basically what happened with the laser. The laser kind of got to the point where it was no longer being seen very clearly. Even at the 8 miles, the one time that we did see it, it was really faint, and that was pitch dark, 10 o'clock at night. So we started thinking that we just needed a brighter light. And one of the things that stuck out was when we look across the beach, even if we're looking 15 miles, 20 miles, you can see the lights that are on different buildings really clearly. So we said, we need one of those lights. So we started shopping around and found a Bob, who's on the call as well today, Xanadude 60, better known as, found a really cool 6800 lumen flashlight. The thing is a mini sun. Did you get yours, Bob?
Yes, I did. I just finally got it yesterday, and that thing is absolutely amazing.
It is really awesome. I can't even believe it. I haven't taken it outside yet or done anything with it, but tonight we're going to take it, and it's getting charged up now. And yeah, it is really something. Especially, I was flipping through it, and I didn't even realize that there was the, I don't know what you call that, Superman mode.
Yeah, the super turbo mode.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that. So somebody asked, do you know that water bends light, and about refraction? Well, yes, I do know that, but I also know that when you're talking about the laser, we could actually see at the 4 miles it going across the water, hitting the other side, and knowing that the water, being able to see the water right in front of you. So I don't really know what you mean by bending the light. It wouldn't bend. You're saying it would bend down with the water? Kind of confused on that one. And then also, I had a couple people asking about the light being able to be seen from behind the curve, which should also be impossible because there's a wall of water there, and the light shouldn't be able to penetrate that water. Tonight when we go, it should be really obvious. I mean, like I said, we've already gone to this location and actually seen the green laser. And so that's why I really don't have a lot of doubts about tonight being seen. I just actually think it'll be really easy. My wife is going to be with the camera on a 4-foot tripod. So we can call that 6 feet if we want, just to make it kind of easy. And I'm going to be right at the water with the, I call it a portable sun, with the 6800 lumen flashlight. And I don't even think she'll need to zoom in with the camera. I think that light will be able to be seen from her just standing there, but we're going to see tonight and hopefully go from there. So I don't think that there's any issue with this particular light and bending. Bob, you see any kind of issues with the bending of light or refraction on a test like this?
Actually, no. Whoops. Hang on a second. There we go. You hear me?
Yep.
Okay. No, actually, I don't see any at all. The idea basically is so that you can zoom the camera across and actually be able to spot the light. We're not too worried about the light beam making it to you, because the premise is we're going to take the optics to the light. So
Right.
I think that's a much more sound premise, and you really can't argue that anything is bending the light at that point, because you're zooming right up to it.
Right. And when we did the math on it, taking the 8 miles and taking the camera at 6 feet, which is actually, like I said, giving it about a 2-foot leeway, because it's only going to be on a 4-foot tripod and at the water base. So even if we gave it 6 foot, nothing should be able to be seen from 16 feet or down. So this will be one of those kind of, that means I can hold the camera, I mean, I can hold the light up at chest high, waist high, knee high, and there's no way that should be seen. I should be able to hold it up above my head. There's no way that camera should be able to see the light. So I'm excited about it. Weather's been iffy here in California for about a week or two, kind of stuffy and real humid. But today actually seems really nice. So I'm hoping that we have good weather. But again, I actually think that this light would fight through whatever's out there. So see what else we have here. Joseph said that he put out some videos about perspective and the vanishing point using water. And Mark Sargent was fascinated with the latest series of experiments. Yeah, I'll have to check out your channel. I'm not sure if yours is the one I've seen. If you guys saw my video, I was also kind of doing the same thing, putting a little boat in the distance and zooming in and out of the camera. But I clearly see like a distortion coming from what would be the sun reflecting off the water. I clearly see it. So for me, that makes sense. Where I'm having a problem is if you've seen some of the videos that one of the guys, Red's Rhetoric, I think his name is, that has made some debunking videos against me. When he debunked the Chicago skyline, he went straight to refraction. It's a mirage. I'm an idiot. How do I not believe in mirages? But then when he had a video showing a boat going over the edge in the ocean, he went straight to, it's not a mirage, it's not refraction, that's the boat going over the curve. So to me, that's pretty obvious when you have somebody who picks and chooses when they want to use certain elements. And that's something I've noticed in the last year of following science that really started to bother me, is that it seemed like they pick and choose when they want to use different elements. Gravity, is it a pull? Is it a push? Is it mutually attractive? Isn't that kind of the same as negating? I also have issues with traveling at speeds in relative to another thing. When you say, well, we are both, us and the moon are both going around the sun at 66,000 miles per hour relative to the sun, which just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's the same as saying we're not moving. So
yeah, Jeran, did you also notice on the one video that had the boat that was supposedly going down over the horizon, that the camera was supposed to be at a fixed level, and yet the water level mysteriously kept rising higher and higher and higher.
Yep.
It was almost as if somebody was just zooming in on the picture itself rather than zooming in on the boat.
Right. I noticed that too. And I questioned him about it, and of course he said I was crazy. But and that upsets me, because if there's one thing that, you know, I know nobody has to trust me, and I tell people don't trust me, but if there's one thing I'm not doing, it's I'm not doing anything to fake anything. I'm not trying to prove the flat earth by faking stuff. I mean, to me, that's just, it's ridiculous, and kind of makes me upset when I start looking at some things like, how did we all get told as kids that water in the southern hemisphere went down the opposite direction because of you know, the difference in the hemispheres? I mean, that to me seems like somebody was blatantly lying. And when you start seeing lies like that, to me, it kind of shows the person who's not got truth on their side, you know, Bob?
Yes, I totally agree with that. You know, you just have to wonder why they resort to things like that, where it's so clear that they're faking things like that. It just boggles the mind. But you know, there are a lot of shills out there that will do virtually anything to, you know, prove NASA right and prove the flat Earth model wrong. And it's very threatening because, you know, as I've said many times, this is the mother of all conspiracies.
Oh, it is.
So-
Yep. Yeah, and I think that I don't know if you've seen also the video from the UC. What is it? UC. I can't remember if it's Berkeley or I think it's down in LA. But they're the one who looks like the old pirate ship going over the edge, and that's also been proven the same way. If you watch the water line keep rising, because what they're doing is tilting the camera back, and that's something I talked about in my last video, and I hope that's why I want to leave here at 5:30. I want to try and get some video of that. Highway 1, which it's about maybe 200 or I would say it's a football field away from the beach there in Monterey, but it's very high. And when you drive that road, because the water comes up to your eye level, it is the most amazing sight. It actually looks like the water is going to dump on the freeway. So I can't even really speak on what that is or the reason behind it. All I know is that the water has to come up to your eye level, and to me that would never happen on a ball. Just because I'm up, you know, say 50 or 100 feet on the freeway, that should just allow me to see further over a ball edge. Not that the ball would have to come up and meet my eyes. So have you ever seen that before, Bob, at all?
Yes, I have many times. When I used to live out in California, I would come around those bends, and it was an amazing sight because it literally looks like a tsunami is coming right at you. And I think probably the best person to ask, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he goes by My Perspective.
Yeah,
And,
I actually have seen his videos.
Yeah, can't remember his name. I'm sure somebody in the chat knows it, but he is phenomenal in the way that he's so able to break it down into very simple terms and very basic illustrations that bring the point across very elegantly.
Yeah, I thought some of his videos are awesome. He seems like he's got a really good grasp on that. So I'm actually writing that down to contact him, because I do think that's important and I don't really understand it. I see somebody else asked about cones of view. Do you know anything about that, Bob?
Not a lot, but I see that somebody put up Rory Cooper, and that is his name.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I seen one video that talked about the cones. They seem to make sense in just looking at it. I know it kind of, the way I would describe it in my head is like looking down a hallway. The way that everything converges to that one central point.
Oh,
So,
yes. Yeah, like
yeah.
you're looking through the top side of a pyramid down.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I'm gonna have to look into that a little bit more because I do think there is something there. It's definitely tricks of the optics. And another thing I've been having issues with is I was trying to watch sunsets the other night on YouTube, and I noticed that it doesn't appear to me, at least, that the sunsets I see from anywhere else in the country are the same as the sunsets here at the coast. So that's another thing I'm not sure if people have ever noticed before, but I'll describe this in a very second grade way. It actually does look to me when I watch other sunsets I watched one from New York and New Jersey, Boston, when the sun looks like it's going further away from you. It looks like you threw a ball, it's getting smaller and smaller and goes off into the distance. From the beach, to me, it appears that the sun goes over my head and it appears to hit a wall. It literally stops and then no longer goes off in the distance. It drops like it's dropping down a wall. I guess the way I would describe it is like your bedroom if you picture the sun going across the top of your ceiling, and then it hits that far wall and like turns and then drops down that wall. So really weird. I've been looking into that a little bit, trying to figure out what is going on with that. So anybody's got any good, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, of course, the sunsets here in Colorado go down over the mountains, so it's really kind of difficult to tell that from here. But fortunately, I'll be in Hawaii in 2 weeks, and I can take some pictures of the sunset there, which is quite spectacular, and probably very similar to what you get there in California.
Oh, that's going to be perfect, Bob. You know what we'll have to do, Bob, is be on the phone or have us both record exactly what we see, because since when I see that sun dip behind the horizon, I want to know where that is in your sky from Hawaii.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that would be extremely, extremely beneficial, because those are the things that I just can't grasp, because we don't have anybody that I know that's over there. I had a lot of people emailing me. They're really interested in doing collaborative things. I thought the person's idea about doing the balloons was awesome. I think if we can get 10 people across the world to all do a balloon at the same time on a full moon night, I think that the benefits of that are astronomical. And same thing with somebody else was asking about just kind of doing a Skype call or one of these calls where we have 15 or 20 people, where it's on a full moon night or a particular day when the moon is out during the day, say over in Europe or something, just to kind of get an idea of what everybody sees at that time. And I think those are great ideas. I think we need to work as a team like that, because one person can't do it. You just can't see it enough.
I absolutely agree. I'm curious. I really haven't looked into the weather balloons too far, but I'm curious how high up they go, or if you know anything about that, as far as what kind of perspective we're going to get from them.
Yeah, I don't think they go. I don't know if anybody can answer that question. I see somebody asking if I'm going to live link tonight's laser experiment. Yeah, I usually do when I'm out there. We've had bad luck the last couple times when I do it, but if everything's looking good, I'll always do it when I'm out there. So just making sure my wife doesn't drop her phone in the water, or make sure I have my charge. Yeah, it's working.
Excellent.
She's got there's like a couple spots on the screen that don't work, but she makes it happen.
That's good.
Yeah, so let's see here. What else? Babe, do you know how far those weather balloons go up?
I guess it depends on the size, because there's different sizes.
I don't know why I'm thinking 70,000 feet. Does that sound? I don't know if I've heard that or seen that. Oh, somebody said about 100,000 feet. So that should be a good perspective. Have you seen that video, Bob, where that guy saw the moon that should have been on the other side of the Earth?
Yes, I did. I did see that. I was actually going to send you that link, because basically he showed the geometry and basically said how absolutely impossible that would be in a ball Earth model. And he was right, because the perspective, you wouldn't be able to see it because you'd be on the wrong side of the planet. So, yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the better proofs I've seen personally. And I think that I don't know if it's just me, but lately, whenever I really contemplate the ball at all, I hit a lot of points where I can't explain it anymore. The other day, just thinking about an eclipse, they say that an eclipse is the sun on one side, the Earth in the middle, the moon on the other. How can somebody on the dark side of the Earth see the sun and see the moon if they're standing on a ball? You'd have to be able to see through. And then I looked it up because I was really interested in it. And basically they say, because of refraction again, that when the sun is below the horizon, it's actually not, it's really above. And when the moon is above, it's actually below. It's another one of those instances where that's not science. Just when things don't work out your way, you just get to throw in I call it the get out of jail free card.
Yeah. Joseph Kilmera says, I take it you won't be using a GoPro. And that's one thing that honestly I would like to avoid, because I would like to avoid the fisheye lens effect altogether.
Yeah, I don't want to use anything fisheye, not at all. I think it's definitely a distortion. You can tell why those things are invented and pushed so hard. I mean, it's just, yeah.
And they're neat for their purpose and everything, but you know, when you're trying to show any concavity or convexness on the planet, they kind of defeat the purpose.
Oh, completely, yeah. And they basically go back and forth: convex, concave, convex, concave.
Yeah, exactly.
So this person here is saying the moon did not set in Nevada on July 14th until 9:30 a.m. local. Is that the day of the rocket launch I'm guessing he's talking about? But that's the kind of thing where we're not going to be able to take that one video and call it proof anyway, just because, you know, they could just come back and say, actually, it was the day before we launched it, whatever. But it's something that we can look at going forward. And that's what I think is important, and why I wanted to launch on a full moon, because I think that maybe somebody on the day side is going to catch a glimpse of the moon. So
yeah, and I noticed, you know, the other thing I'm curious about is I look at some of the images of full moons from like the southern hemisphere, and I think it was in somebody that supposedly was doing a debunk video for one of your videos. They're showing that the moon in Australia and then the moon in Seattle, and they look like they're completely upside down from each other. But yet when I go and I pull up other images, the only thing that I see is that it's basically the same perspective. However, the moon is just leaned slightly back. So it is far from completely inverted. That's why I was saying last night that I would really like to see that shot from somebody that, you know, we know that isn't modifying the video or anything, and see what that actually really looks like.
Yeah, I don't think it's flipped like they say it is. Yeah, we see that a lot too. I don't know. I've seen a lot of eclipse videos where they're showing the moon changing in all kinds of directions. I don't think that happens. I had a couple people making comments today about the 24-hour sun in Antarctica, and I've looked before. There's one or two videos on YouTube, and they're both government sites or government bases down there.
Exactly. And you know, the interesting thing about that, Jeran, is I was looking at a lot of the bases down in Antarctica, and it turns out that virtually all of them are between the 70 and 80 south mark.
Really?
And I think it's only the Amundsen Scott station that is supposed to be at the at 90 south.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I don't believe that for a second, but then how are we ever going to verify that? But I did think it was very interesting that all of the other ones are not that far south. They just kind of line the outer edge, if you will.
Imagine that, huh? Have you seen the Masonic symbols down there?
Oh yeah.
They've got a lot of big sticks in the snow, and they got their nice, pretty Masonic symbols everywhere, and pretty cool, guys. So for me personally, I think it's obvious what's going down with with Antarctica, we're not seeing anything from any independent people, because there's nobody independent down there. They're not letting, and that's another thing. I don't know if you're listening to this and you're one of the people who constantly goes on this fly to Antarctica thing. Yeah, because I see it all the time, and I just want to make sure people understand. Yes, there is an airliner that will fly you down to what they say is the South Pole. So it's extremely expensive. Even a trip down there is something like 20 grand. None of us are going to go down there because, first of all, they even admit that the compass goes kind of wacky. So basically they can fly you over anywhere they want and tell you, we just flew over the South Pole, and you're going to have no choice but to say, fantastic, thanks. And it's just not worth it to anybody to actually do that. So yeah. I see it a lot, and it just kind of bothers me because, I mean, it's too expensive, and there's that one plane, that one airline that does it, and I think they do a New Year's flight. It costs an arm and a leg. Have you seen that before?
Yeah, something. In fact, I have a customer that owns a housing company here in Colorado, and he just recently took that journey down there, and he said that basically they will touch you down on the islands surrounding the main continent, but you don't actually ever get to actually go on the continent itself. And I guess, there's all kinds of treaty restrictions and stuff like that. So you really, even the trips that are offered are very, very limited in their scope as to where you can go.
Right. Yeah, that's what I see too. So, I mean, these are the kind of things that I think that have at least led me to, it's not just a matter of, well, the world looks flat, so I say it's flat. And that I think is what a lot of people think, or they think that I rolled out of bed and said, I'm bored, I'm going to say the earth's flat. And believe me, that's the last thing I wanted to do. In fact, it's the last thing I want to do anyway, is to have to disprove the mountain of scientific evidence that is stacked up against me when I know that it's fabricated. One of the things that Red's rhetoric keeps getting on me about is, why won't I debate him? Which is, again, I don't understand. As I said, what do you mean debate you? What is there to debate if you have science and you're just going to spit off mathematics that don't conform to reality, and I'm just going to be coming at you with visual evidence and that you'll be able to shoot down with mathematics? It's like, that's not anywhere near anything that I'm thinking of doing. I think there's other ways to go about proving it. So just so you guys know, if you see him going around spouting off that I am backing down from debating him, like I've told him a million times, science has had 400 years to build a mathematical model around the details that they wanted to make it all work, to make it all click. And it doesn't even work, because you can't work life like that. You can't just make things work. They did the best that they could. But I tell people who ask me, well, what do you think meteorites are? What are shooting stars? And I say, you know what? Relax. Give me half the time that science had. Give me 200 years and I'll have every single fact down 100%. But,
yeah, exactly. I get so tired of that. People asking, well, show me the math for this and show me the math for that, and how come this and how come that? And, it's clear that they really haven't looked into it much at all, and they're either looking for a full-time tutor on it, or I think the larger case is that they're just out there to try and distract you from all the people that are making serious inquiry into it. And so I used to have the opinion basically that, yeah, everybody can ask questions and all this stuff, but it becomes apparent after a while that some of these people are just there to occupy your time, and then whenever you are able to show something that is relatively good evidence, they absolutely just go by it and bypass it. For example, the latest pictures that NASA came out with of the ball Earth, where everybody thinks those are the greatest things since sliced bread, and yet when you scrutinize them, you can see the cloud replications over and over and over again. And one of them, a guy just pointed out last night that if you flip it over, you can see in big white letters SEX in the picture itself, which is just unbelievable. How in your face they put this stuff.
yeah, it's like, I picture these nerds like sitting at, let's put sex in the clouds. It's like, that's just the way I picture. I can't picture somebody saying, let's actually do that, and thinking that they're cool for doing it, but somebody's doing it. And yeah, I think that picture's ridiculous. I actually think that Antarctica should be able to be seen from that perspective.
Oh yeah. And the United States is absolutely enormous in one of them. It takes up the whole northern hemisphere.
Which, another thing that doesn't make sense is that, I think I said in my video today that the actual quality of the picture is no different than 1972. You would think that after 40 years we would have maybe added a couple megapixels to it or something, but it's the identical quality. But how did they take that picture from 18,000 miles away in 1972?
Yeah,
it's impossible. I mean, first of all, I don't even know if you'd be able to take a picture of something that size from 18,000 miles away. And then they say, well, they could never take a picture of Earth because they needed to get far enough away. So now this satellite is 1 million miles away, and the picture looks the same.
Yeah, exactly. And we do have things called, wide angle lenses and stuff like that. And you would think for $1 trillion, NASA would have, bought one or two of those.
Yeah, just fly a little camera, 24-hour. And, I was going to do a video on it, and I haven't yet. But somebody sent me an email about a company. Gosh, what's their name? I'll think of it in a second. It's a company that in 2013 said that they were going to be putting a live cam on a webcam on the moon. And they had a CEO and about 10 guys that worked for them. And they were like a big deal. I think they either won or competed in the Lunar X Prize. And I went to their Facebook page, and like as of February of this year, they have completely disappeared. I can't find the CEO. I can't find any of these guys. And they were all about it. They were putting out videos saying how there's helium-3 on the moon and it's going to power the Earth for hundreds of years. I mean, they were like going all out, and they just disappeared. I'll actually get the name of them, because if you look them up, they still have their site up. Yeah, they still have their site up. Let me see here real quick if I can find it. But anyway, it just was a joke, because they said by 2015 they would have this webcam up. And I even saw that the last thing that's on their Facebook is February 2nd or something. Some guy says, "Hey, are you guys still putting the webcam up this year?" And they never even respond. That's the last thing ever put on there. So yeah. I don't know what happened. It's like they just disappeared.
Well, if it's half as pathetic as the ISS HD live viewing experiment, Earth viewing experiment.
What a joke that is.
That is absolutely unbelievable. I watch that and I look at it and I'm saying to myself, where is the parallax? Why is it that everything far off in the horizon and on each side is coming at me at the exact same speed as what you can observe directly underneath it? That violates every law of physics, basically, that there is. And in addition to that, I always notice that they never really have any decent shots of anything identifiable on the land. It seems like the clouds are always conveniently covering this, unless it is a canned released video that never really came from the ISS, or never really came from that site in the first place, but it's just all fabricated. In fact, somebody showed me one the other night, because I had been asking, it's like, how come you can't see any lightning strikes at night? And there are literally tens of thousands of strikes that occur every single day, no matter where you are, and you can never see that. So he puts up this one video that was canned, and it was beautiful. It showed all the lights of the cities, and sure enough, there were lightning strikes there, but you never, ever, ever see that on the live feed itself, which to me is just absurd.
Oh yeah, the whole thing. And another thing I heard, because I always had questions about them not showing stars, and somebody said it has something to do with the way the camera is set, the aperture or whatever. And I said, well, you're telling me they have one camera up there? Why wouldn't they have a camera set to take pictures of the stars rather than turn off the 24-hour-a-day live cam? Because they turn it off every 45 minutes when they go on the dark side of the Earth. Why not just pull out the other camera and tape the stars? Well, yeah, of course they won't. We know why.
And in addition to that, I mean, the frequencies that they're using propagate at line of sight. So you have to ask yourself, if the ISS is really up there at 250 miles, which is line of sight with virtually everything, and certainly any relay station, why is it that they constantly lose signal? I mean, that's just patently absurd. So
yeah, it's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. Yet they'll talk to, these space shuttles, the one that's 12 billion miles away and the one that's over at Pluto. Those they have no problem communicating with. Boo. Does everybody see this? I don't know if you can see my screen. Can you see my screen, Bob?
I see it. Yeah. Oh, there, it just popped up on the live feed.
Okay. So just wanted to show you real quick this company. I'm going to see what happens if I press play here, and this might be a problem, but we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't play out there. Okay, move this up. I just want to show you this because it is ridiculous that I don't know what happened to these guys, but they've got scientists and that are in charge of it. And, these are the kind of guys where I'm like, these guys know if something's up. They know at this point that they're not able to go to the moon or whatever, and they don't tell anybody. It's like they've been silenced. I don't know if it's a money thing or I'm trying to play this video, and now I don't even see the play button. Oh, I see what's going on. Oops, I lost it. This little thing's in my way. I can't get past this little stop sharing. Oh, there you go. Okay. Let's see what happens if I press play here. Okay, so I'm not sure if you can, I can't really announce it if it's going to be delayed, but basically they've got a really nice site, but it talks about all this equipment that they have ready and that they've already secured this $30 million in funding. Yeah, $30 million in Google money. They've got all these big name scientists, or I don't know if they're big name, but they unveiled their lander in 2014. And I think I show it here in a second. I'll pull it up.
Yeah, it's just the video is just skipping here on this side, and I'm not really seeing anything on the live feed either.
Okay, I'll stop it. But yeah, basically, I just went around, showed their Facebook page that they're done there, and so what was the name, so everybody can go to that site and check it out, because it's all up there still, which is crazy. I don't even know why they would have it available still, because you would think that they would disappear. But yeah, I couldn't even find the CEO, and I think he's from the Bay Area, but I couldn't find where he's working now, or I was going to try and get in contact with him and say, hey, what's going on? Speaking of that, I did want to also mention, so what is it? It's Moon Express is the name of it. And I think it's just moonexpress.com. So if anybody wants to go there and check it out, I'm going to pop back over here, see if anybody's got any questions.
You need dual monitors there, Jeran.
I do, I know. I should hook up my TV, but somebody asked me if I would call myself a flat earther or a round earth skeptic. You know, to be honest, I think that the earth is flat because everything I see says so, as far as the tests we've been doing. So a lot of people have been sending me emails and messages about the concave earth, or we're inside the ball. And I don't see anything that tells me that. I even remember back in January or February when I had questions still about it, emailing and messaging Stephen Christopher a few times and asking him questions, and he just blew me off and basically said, it's the truth, it is the way it is, deal with it. And I couldn't figure it out. I could never, and I have a problem with gravity. I think gravity is completely horseshit. I think it's got no kind of real connection with physical life. I think it's obvious that we have weight. I mean, even gravity itself, doesn't the word mean weight? I think it comes from it comes from gravis.
That's exactly
right?
what it means, yes.
Yeah. So even the Latin word means weight. And yet when you say that, if you saw my video, I thought one of the funniest comments I've ever seen was that guy who said, now, wait a second, help me out here. How would anything move if it wasn't for gravity? And it's like, that's what people need to realize, is that's what was taught to us in school, is like, it's the fundamental force of life, but it's a force that says two items both attract each other. That doesn't make any sense.
No, it really doesn't. You know, I look at it and I think the buoyancy model and, you know, the density actually explains a lot. I still have some questions about that, though, in that even if things are buoyant, it seems like there's still something that would draw, you know, things down in one direction. So even though the buoyancy explanation seems to work very well, I haven't quite figured that one out in my head yet. No,
unless there's, I mean, obviously we humans know the difference between up and down, and that's something that is needed to live life. You can't, I know that they like to say in space there's no up and down, but there has to be here on Earth. And that's another reason that I would not call myself a ball skeptic so much, because then you're saying that it could be something else, and I don't see it being anything else. You know, my big thing was the water being flat when I really was looking into this last year. And so I could not even imagine, even if somebody said we're like a hump, like a lens, even that would cause water to fall down. And we don't see that at the beach. I see water going up. Now, again, somebody might say, oh, well, then you're saying it's concave. No, because the water goes up until it hits my eye level. And then I want to say it goes back down. Obviously, it's not physically going up to my eye level, so it's not physically going back down anywhere. But there's no way that it's going up over my head.
Exactly. And up and down obviously are relative in that, you know, if the Earth was a ball, the people in the southern hemisphere would literally be standing upside down with respect to the way that we in the northern hemisphere are standing. But one of the things that, you know, everybody will say is, well, you know, it's the gravity that's holding them, you know, at a right angle, basically 90-degree angle to the center of gravity, which would be like the center of the Earth. And that's all fine and good. But if you imagine yourself on the side of a globe, okay, and gravity is working to pull you towards the center and holding you on, what's stopping you from leaning over to the side, you know, in the downward direction? That never flew for me. So
no, and I've been trying to draw a model or get like a GIF or something. It just doesn't work when you, and it's kind of like these, I like to give these thought experiments, but if you picture a globe and say you put a person in every possible location. So now you picture a globe covered in people everywhere. And then you start that thing spinning. Imagine what each person would see as in reference to the stars. The amount of different variations in the star patterns. I mean, if you just picture somebody who's facing in not a northeast, south, or west, but say a northwest or a northeast, and that person is spinning, their position is going to change throughout that 360-degree turn in a way that's going to make the stars do almost a zigzag. And it's something that, you know, I'm having a hard time showing people, but I'm able to see it, and I can kind of do it on Google Earth and kind of move the Earth in a way that it just doesn't make any sense. And I had a lot of people give me some kickback on my star video from last week, saying that I'm way off base and that the stars do move. And I think these are one of those things where people hear that there's the stellar parallax and they think, oh, well, they say that the stars do move and it's a noticeable change. I mean, if you look that up, it's like 1/1000th of an arc degree that the stars change. It's like one star that somebody can see with specialized equipment. So, and then they say, well, they move and then they come back. And their excuse for that is, well, we travel around the sun. So we start at, say, point A, or let's say 6 o'clock on a clock, and we go around, and then we're over at 12 o'clock. And when we come back to 6, that's their excuse for returning to the place where the stars go back to normal. But then they take out of the equation the fact that the sun is traveling at 500,000 miles per hour. That's 12 million miles a day that it's moving. So how are we ever getting back to the point where the stars are even close to resembling the same thing? And I mean, at this point, it's frustrating to me that so many people are fighting this so hard. That's hard.
They basically say, you know, well, the reason for that is because it's so far away that, you know, it would move very little. But, you know, you would think that year after year after year, it would be, you know, noticeable to a much larger degree than it already is. And I did see that comment that somebody made to you about, you know, Orion, for example, only being visible, I think, in December or November through March, something like that. And that is true. And, you know, the flat Earth model very clearly says that the stars are in motion above the Earth. And that seems to make sense. So, but I don't think that it's anywhere near what they're, you know, the model doesn't allow for these fantastic changes in distance and yet no change in perspective whatsoever. So, you know, to me, the stars changing overhead makes a lot more sense than us hurtling through space at 500,000 miles an hour and nothing ever changing, you know, relatively speaking.
Yeah, no, I struggle with a lot of it because I feel like when they give me the explanation for it, they draw the stars on a 2D plane and explain them by showing a little tiny sun and a little tiny earth and showing these stars way up high and saying, well, we travel here around the sun, but that doesn't change our view of these stars so far away. But when I picture it in my mind, if you think of the sun in the middle and the earth on the right side, well, then the dark side of that earth is on the far right side, and somebody standing at the very top of that earth, now they're going to have all the stars above them, but that's going to be on your far right if I'm kind of looking in front of me. And then when you travel to the other side of the sun, well, now you would be on the other side, technically, if we don't look at the fact that that doesn't even work. But if you'd be on the other side, and then you'd be on the far left looking up, so all the stars you would see would be on your super far left. So to me, those are very different locations, no matter how far away the stars are. That how could two people who are basically, if you kind of picture it, of two people with their feet together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So two people standing with their feet touching, and if you spread them out as far as the Earth travels, and then say that both those people see the same stars above their heads, it's impossible. I mean, no matter how far they are, they could be gazillion miles away, and those two people are on different sides. They can't see the same things, especially when you've got the sun right in the middle, which should technically be in the way of anything that could have been seen from the other side. I don't know. I'm probably making no sense, but
no, you are. It's like, and it seems like the empirical evidence would suggest that, the stars are actually much, much, much closer than, I mean, a lot closer than we've been told that they are. Just because of a change in perspective from down here on Earth, you would think that it would be massively, or it would be very much the same if they were really, hundreds of millions of light years away. It really wouldn't matter, where you were, and yet it seems like a small amount of distance will really change the night sky. I've noticed that several times just going from Colorado to Hawaii. It's almost like a totally different sky altogether.
Right. So, would that be the case? But then you're not noticing any change when you're just, I mean, how far are you moving there? You're going, what, 6,000 miles?
Yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
the constellations are still the same, but it's just like your perspective on them is different than what I would see in the Colorado night sky.
Right. So what I'm saying is you're moving 6,000 miles and your perspective is totally different, yet we're moving relative to the sun, moving, millions of miles in a couple months, and yet we don't see any change. There might, there's a slight change, but I'm saying, how could those two things be mutually, existent? Doesn't seem like they should be.
Exactly. And of course our relative position to other stars is, like I said, more of a factor of sidereal position. As I was telling you about the other day, when you have the solar day and you have the sidereal day, and the solar day, of course, is in reference to the sun and our position, next to the sun. Whereas the sidereal day is some other star, say Sirius, outside of our solar system. And again, even that only has a 4-minute variance every day. So again, that would indicate that they're much, much, much closer than we've been told.
Absolutely. And I think I even told you when you mentioned that, that's actually an excuse that somebody gave me one time when I said, just in the simple thinking, said, hey, it doesn't make any sense to me. 6 months later, the dark side of the earth would then be facing the sun. And the reason that they told me was, oh no, our days are 23 hours and 56 minutes, so that by the time we get to the other side, we've made enough of a turn that now the night sky faces away from the sun. So that's why I think you told me last week, and I kind of blew you off as saying, oh no, it's, you have to look at sidereal time. And that's when you said, no, that's relative to the stars, not to the sun.
Exactly.
And I went and looked it up, and you're absolutely right. So that's just another one of those proofs that somebody just threw at me. It seems like to kind of get me off the trail, and these are like, these are science people that are telling me these things. It just baffles me that they throw around these terms, and I don't think anybody understands them. I mean, all these kids, or I say kids, but all these people in the forums or in the comment section that talk about gravity like they understand it, when physicists don't understand gravity. I mean,
Yeah.
graduate, upper level physicists that are even writing peer-reviewed papers refuting gravity completely.
Yeah. Well, science doesn't understand a lot of things. As you know, I'm an electrical engineer.
Right.
And I find it amazing that, we can predict what electricity will do. We can calculate various characteristics of it. We can calculate the work it'll do, yada, yada, yada. But the reality is we really do not know what electricity actually is. And that's just amazing. We work with it all the time, and yet we really don't have a clue or a rational explanation for why it is.
Unbelievable. What do you think of that guy Dollard?
No.
You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's the Eric Dollard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that's the guy that is really pushing a bizarre model. Or am I thinking of the wrong guy?
No, I think you're thinking of the same guy. I've seen a couple of videos of him sitting in a truck.
Him. Yes,
Yeah.
I think he is amazing. Absolutely amazing. Some of the esoteric knowledge that he has revealed.
Right.
Yes.
I think that's Eric Dollard, is it not? Or am I thinking of somebody else?
No, that is Eric Dollard.
Yeah,
I was actually thinking of one of the guys that you were making fun of yesterday, one of your, in one of your videos. But Eric Dollard, that guy is absolutely amazing with some of the work that he has presented in the field of cymatics and understanding waveforms. And he talks about, there are certain organs out there that just have unbelievable harmonic properties and the way that it harmonizes things and how it actually just gets inside of you and moves you. It's really phenomenal.
Yeah, that's crazy to me because, when I read a lot of stuff by Tommaso Campanella, who wrote in the late 1500s, early 1600s, and unfortunately he's got 5 or 6 books that I know have all the answers in them, but they are hidden by the Vatican in their locked away dungeon, and they tell you that they don't have any books anymore that are off limits. All you have to do is request them, but I've personally requested them 4 or 5 times, even as a family member, and they don't even respond. So, but he talked a lot about the same kind of things, that the sounds and the harmonizing, and talking about the same things that Dollard talks about with the sun. Dollard says it great that nobody knows what the sun is. That's the incredible thing about it. And I think, I don't like to bring religion into it a lot, but to me, those are signs that the Creator would put here so that it's a creation.
Mm-hmm.
That since science is all about, well, everything's natural, we know where everything comes from, we know how everything gets here. That's why they have to assign different things to each of these models and tell us that it's a nuclear reactor. And the pictures of the sun that they show us with the flaming ball, and nobody sees anything close to that. We've taken some great pictures of the sun, zoomed into the point where I can even see sunspots, and there's no flames coming off the sun. It's not 92 million miles away.
No.
These things are upsetting.
Yeah, that model has always changed too throughout history. It went from a big fireball in the sky to some sort of a nuclear reaction. And of course, now they have the electric universe theory, which posits it as what's called a Z-pinch, a plasma Z-pinch, where plasma strands basically wind around each other so tightly that it brings this node out in the form of like a ball. And that's an interesting theory, but that would really seem to only work in deep space, like if the sun actually was 93 million miles away. But when you look at the sun, especially in a lot of these newer videos with the rockets going up and the weather balloons, the sun's proximity is so much closer. It is so obvious.
Absolutely.
It's just amazing that people cannot accept that because we've been told no, it's 93 million miles away. And the empirical observation of that is that's absurd. So
yeah, it doesn't even resemble anything that would work at that kind of distance. We would have straight sun rays. We wouldn't have sun rays that look like they're emanating from a point or starting from a point and coming through the clouds the way they do. And that's what's upsetting, is that so many people, I could understand if this is your life, that if you're Brian Cox, let's say.
crying box.
Oh God, that guy, can't believe it. Did you see his little tweet the other day?
Yeah, I did. I've called him crying box. I love the way they refer to him at Clues Forum, and that's what they call him. He's just pathetic.
I love that's good proof of the moon landing, though, to just say, if you don't believe in the moon landing, you're a knobhead and you need a new brain.
Yeah, you're adult. That's it.
Yeah. So thank you very much. But and I can understand where he's coming from, basically saying, look, I went to school all these years. I've done all these tests, and it only works if we went to the moon. So I can understand where, if we didn't go to the moon, to him, that's a breakdown of everything that he is. And that's why he can't get over the hump. But what I don't understand is a lot of these people that are just seem like everyday Joes that are in the comment sections, and they will fight for that ball.
Yes.
And
yes.
They don't even understand it. And a lot of people will come to me and ask for answers. I get a ton of emails, over 100 a day right now, from people asking me, how does this work? What's the story behind this? What's this? What's that? And it's hard for me to tell them, but I say, guys, I wish I could give you these answers. I don't know that, and I never came into this and said I'm a genius. I just saw clear examples that showed right in front of your face of what was going on, and everything led to another. When you look at the Freemasons, and you look at NASA and the way they started and the way that they've become, and then you look at okay, well, here's SpaceX. Oh, thank God, we're going to have this private company come in, and right away it was like they were put on a leash by NASA, to where they've never even sent a man to space. All they've done is attempted to send supplies.
And blow up rocket ships.
And blow up rockets. And if you ask me, that looked like an explosion from helium. I've said it a bunch of times that if you go back and watch some of those Apollo 8, Apollo 6, watch those things take off, you can see the clouds, you can see the bushes moving. Everything is in real time. And that rocket takes off going 10 miles an hour. It does not go fast like it's being propelled by any kind of jet propulsion. It is slowly rising off the, and then they call it liftoff.
Right. And that's why I was saying, to me, I mean, when you look at any other rocket, even from the very smallest to the largest ones, when they go up, when they come off the ground, because of the fact that no matter what NASA says, they are working against the atmosphere and the ground. But when they come off the ground, if you can imagine a person on the inside of that, they would be crushed instantly from the G-force. So when I look at the big, rockets taking off, headed for space, supposedly, it looks to me more like some sort of a vertical takeoff and landing system, kind of like the Harrier jump jet.
Right.
Where it just kind of, moseys on up, because it takes forever to even clear the, a few seconds anyway, to clear the launch tower.
Yeah, they can get to 8 or 9 seconds into the thing, and they say, we've cleared the tower. It's like, really? Shouldn't they have done that at 2?
Exactly. And yes, they do weigh a lot, supposedly, but that does not excuse them from defying the laws of physics in how a rocket would normally work. And, another thing that I find interesting is one of the threads over at Clues Forum, they actually, it's called, I think, Do Rockets Work in Space? Right. And one of the things that they talk about is that, well, NASA, first of all, you're violating Newton's third law in that, when you're getting out there, you have nothing to work against when you're in space. You're basically draining your rocket propulsion power off into a vacuum. So NASA's answer to that is, oh, okay, well, that's because our rockets don't press against the Earth, or they don't work against the atmosphere, but instead they give the example of, okay, have a man sit yourself down in a chair on like a hard floor and get yourself a big heavy medicine ball. And then put your feet up on the chair and push that medicine ball away as hard as you possibly can. And of course, when you do that, the ball goes one way, you go another.
Mm-hmm.
But they are not describing, what they're describing there is a force called recoil. And
Right.
recoil is something that we've all dealt with. Anybody that shot a gun can see that. And it requires, for recoil to work, it requires at least a measurable amount of mass to offset the projectile that you're going against. So if you try and apply that to a rocket model, it doesn't work, because the more mass that you would try and recoil against means the more mass and weight that you would have to carry up as the payload, which of course is impossible. So that model just doesn't fly. And it just never made any sense to me. And I think basically it's a big lie, because rockets do work against the ground and they do work against the atmosphere. It's as simple as that.
So in space then, because, and there's no way we could even test that, right? Because if we were to get even in a vacuum, there's walls, right? So of
Right,
course
and-
a rocket would eventually shoot off and recoil off a wall.
Right, and even the largest vacuum facility in the world is actually owned by NASA, and it's really not that large. So it would be pretty hard to actually test that for anybody, but then again, that's kind of the NASA way. They will tell you something that is impossible for the average Joe to test. But if you just apply a little bit of common sense to it, it violates all of the very same laws of physics that they're telling us makes it work in the first place. So it's quite a conundrum if you think about it.
No, it is. And that's what's always bothered me about it is you can't even really give an example. I try to give examples of, well, I can construct a model mathematically that'll work, but I can't, because anything that I could say, if I said there was an orb that was, rotating my house and could construct a mathematical model to prove it, you could just come over and say, no, there's not, by just looking or setting up a test to see if there's any change in the air, around the house. But when NASA does it, they've got the get out of jail free card of space, to where I can't go and test anything.
Well,
I can't test what they're saying.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I mean, you can construct a mathematical model for anything.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, it's just like mathematically, we are supposedly able to go as easily backward in time as we are forward. Well, that's great, and it works out fine on mathematics, works out fine on paper, but how are you going to implement that? Build me a device that actually does that. The math on one thing is theoretical, but the actual physics and the mechanical engineering required to build something like that is quite a different story. And the math, unfortunately, can't just say, oh, well, we're going to do this equation, and that's how you build this, and that's how you do that. It doesn't work that way, because if it did, we would be able to come up with any formula for anything and then just build it using that very same math. But
Right.
Unfortunately, that doesn't fly.
So my question is, as far as Apollo and the scientists that believe it, the videos that are of the takeoff from the moon and then the redocking with the lunar orbiter, you've seen those videos, right, where the thing's making little moves right and left and it's going up. Isn't that impossible in space?
Well, yeah, it's kind of like, one thing that they did to reinforce that model is in the movie Gravity. I think there's a scene where basically Sandra Bullock and George Clooney are propelling themselves back towards one of the space vehicles using a fire extinguisher, of course, with the idea that the recoil or the stuff coming out of the fire extinguisher is actually going to work against the vacuum of space and press them around. And if you think about that, that's ludicrous. There's no way that they could work, but yet that's basically fitting in with the NASA model of recoil, which they don't call recoil, but it's basically fitting in with that model, which does not work on paper or in any other way.
So they actually are saying that the lunar lander is shooting out some sort of propellant that's making it move like that?
Apparently, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's what bothers me is I can understand if they're saying we went because we've got pictures from the moon that prove that we did, and we've got all the paperwork and we've got all the blueprints. But then when you see those kind of things that are filmed that just don't jive with even today's conception of space, I don't know how they don't question it. It's nonsense. It's just really, that's what bothers me is that it's almost like Brian Cox has never even looked into it. And I think if you watch my video that I put out a couple months ago at that allus.com, there's a guy that's had an open letter to him for now going on a year that he won't answer. And I mean, it's just, I would have respect for these guys if they would take on these equations and take on these problems with science and give us the answers that we're looking for, but they just ignore it. It's, you know, made me sick what Neil deGrasse said the other day, because I've never heard anybody so arrogant in my entire life. Not a pope, not a priest, not the president of the United States, not anybody. Nobody would ever come out and say, the thing I like best about myself is that I can speak such truth that you can't come back with anything other than to agree with me, because there is no disagreeing with me.
Right.
It's like,
well, that's the hallmark of a shill scientist, basically, and nothing more than a mouthpiece. You know, some of the more real scientists, I would say, are people, for example, like that are promoting the electric universe model, and that one of those people would be a guy named Wal Thornhill. And the great thing about Wal is, I mean, he will go on and get into forums, and he will be very technical. He will come up with models that clearly demonstrate, you know, the points that he's making and how we're making these observations in space, and you know, how it's absolutely repeatable in the laboratory, and will be open and actually answer questions and accept criticisms and stuff like that. Whereas, you know, people promoting the mainstream NASA model, there's not a chance in hell that they would ever do that, because, you know, when you start putting the pieces together, they simply do not add up. And so that's one of the ways that, you know, when I'm researching things, I look for the people that are really more available and open to explain these and point out the laboratory experiments that back up these empirical observations. So,
I mean, in your opinion, just because this is one thing that bothers me, and people like Bill Nye, so you think that he knows that the whole thing's a fraud?
You know, he has to.
He has to, right?
Because, you know, you have to ask yourself, how can these people be so unbelievably intelligent and yet not have asked or answered any of these very seemingly obvious questions? So, you know, when that can't happen and these mainstream scientists either refuse to or you know, change the subject and just basically say, well, it's undebatable because, you know, there are certain laws, you know, there's laws of physics. What was it that Neil Tyson said?
Yeah, there's laws of physics and there's opinion.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, really? Okay, whatever, dude.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, it's just that's the one thing that kills me, because, you know, it would be okay if it was that they have all these proofs and that when somebody comes to debunk them, they're able to prove their side of the story, but they just ignore it in a way that tells me that they have to know that there's a problem with gravity, there's a problem with space travel, there's a problem with the moon landings. They have to know that, or else they're not as intelligent as we even give them credit for.
Absolutely. So, and, you know, it's just like
nonsense.
Yeah, and I know you know about I think it was Alan Bean in the Astronauts Gone Wild video.
Oh God, that was so funny.
Oh God, when Bart Sibrel is asking him, you know, about that, he goes, the space shuttle astronauts were, you know, they recently made a record height flight to something like 300 miles up, and they were saying that the radiation from the Van Allen belts is so intensely strong that they could close their eyes and literally see little flashes of light because of the radiations, you know, hitting the back of their retina. Mm-hmm. And, you know, before Alan Bean said, oh, well, yeah, well, no, we didn't have anything like that. Then all of a sudden he changes his tune and says, oh, yeah, you can do that. You know, you really have to kind of look really closely. But
Close your
then-
eyes and concentrate.
yeah, yeah. And then he kind of inferred that, well, because the Van Allen belts weren't really, mainstream knowledge then, we didn't have any problem with it. We just flew right through it. And I'm just going, what?
Yeah. And he asked him the first time, and he says, "No, we didn't go through the Van Allen belts." He's like, "Well, they're located between 30,000 and I mean, three." And he says, "Oh yeah, we went right through them."
Yeah. How could you have not gone through them? And some of the other things that really seem bizarre to me about objects in space is we allegedly have like 20,000 satellites. The ISS is supposed to be up there.
Oh man.
I'm a sky watcher, and I've got my big meat 10-inch telescope and stuff, and I love to watch things like the Perseids and all the meteor showers, and some of them are absolutely spectacular. You can actually hear them whizzing into the atmosphere, and they make a very loud sound with it, and they light up the sky sometimes. And you think about it, it's like, how on earth are all of those objects out in space never seemingly affected by these incoming objects that are moving 10 times the speed of a bullet?
Yep.
And it just doesn't add up to me. And you never hear anything about that. And then when there was that one lone incident that happened, I don't know, I guess a couple of years ago, where supposedly something like that did happen to the ISS, where some of these went through the solar collectors.
Yeah, I saw the pictures of that.
Yeah, on Clues Forum, it was unbelievable, because every country, every space agency around the world had different pictures of this damage. And I mean, not just different damage, but the solar arrays, the solar collectors themselves were absolutely completely different. And if anybody's interested in seeing that, it's on the cluesforum.info page, where they do a fantastic job of debunking just about anything that NASA has to say. But you look at stuff like that, and it's like, my God, they can't even get their story straight or the picture straight on this International Space Station that has damage that everybody's looking at, and they have to go out and do this spacewalk. And yet, interestingly enough, it's like they're completely different mechanical apparatuses. Doesn't make any sense.
No, and I don't know if you saw. I'm always interested in when they have these shuttle flights, or the Expedition 44 just docked. I guess it was yesterday or the day before. And again, you remember my last video, right, where there's that little black looking model going across the sky. And I made fun of that, and a bunch of people said it wasn't even supposed to be real, which is wrong. It is actually supposed to be real. I'm actually gonna drop a link here for it in the chat so people can check this out. Yeah, go look at that. And I mean, it is so pathetic that they keep putting this out there. And it's like, I was shocked, because I said, wait a second, didn't they just send something up? And I looked it up, sure enough, they sent a shuttle up there July 5th, and now they sent one up the other day. So you're talking about 3 weeks later, just to show that same nonsense model on like a black background, where every once in a while they have to rewind the camera and you actually see this thing back up in space. And it's disgusting. It really is the grossest thing I've ever seen. And they just keep putting it out there, keep putting it out there. I almost think that it's like a whistleblowing kind of thing, where like this is the time that people were either supposed to find out about this, but we're getting so much kickback from people that are, like I said, are fighting it, who just don't see that you can't not see it anymore. The whole Pluto thing with the dog right on the front of the damn planet, and the moon, Sharon or whatever, looks just like our moon. It's like, it's really just sad.
Well, it was interesting. One of the astronauts, Armstrong or Aldrin, something like that, made a tweet the other day, saying something to the effect of, well, yeah, if the moon landings were fake, the Russians would have busted us on it. And it's like, I look at that and I laugh, because if anybody has ever, looked at the Yuri Gagarin, I don't know if I'm pronouncing the last name right.
Gagarin, yeah.
Gagarin, yeah. And that mission where he was, supposedly the first man in space, there were so many anomalies with that. I think one of the biggest things was that he said he was able to see, I think, Panama, like literally like 5 minutes after the launch. And of course that would be, impossible, from that perspective. And so, and there were several other things that were, the timing was wrong on it, what he was supposed to be able to see. But I mean, that was thoroughly debunked. So it's clear to me, between that and then you see things like, what JAXA, they're releasing some of these images
So
that
bad.
are, I know they're so terrible, the Earthrise and stuff like that, where nothing's really moving and all the perspectives are wrong. But I mean, the Japanese people were in such an uproar and making so many comments in the social media that JAXA actually came forward and said, you know what, we're just not going to release these images anymore. And it's like, I just laughed about that because they're all doing it. China's doing it. Russia's doing it. The European Space Agency's doing it. NASA, of course, has been doing it. And it's like, so they are all absolutely in collusion with each other at the very top levels. And they think that, it's going to add legitimacy by saying, oh, well, yeah, these other countries are doing this. And if we would have been faking it, they certainly would have called us out on it. It's like, yeah, if things were really the way that, you tell us they are, where there's this rivalry and all this other stuff going on, but that's just not the way that it is. So one other thing I kind of want to address here real quick is I've noticed the question go by in the chat room about why pilots do not have to push down on the yoke to compensate for the constantly falling off Earth. Well,
Right.
The reason that they don't have to is because it's not curving away from us.
Right.
I've been a pilot for 35 years. I have many thousands of hours in the air. And I can tell you that, not only do we not have to make any sort of adjustment for that, but in navigation, when they teach you how to plot a flight route, we never have to take things into account like Coriolis effect. Basically, the only thing that as a pilot you have to consider, the primary factors are the winds aloft or the winds at flight level, because that will definitely affect your flight time. And the other thing is the other thing is magnetic declination. And basically what that is basically how far away you deter, to the east or the west in reference to your north magnetic point. And you always have to compensate for that when you are flying and navigating a route, so that you can make the appropriate corrections on your compass. So, and then other people have come forward and say, oh, well, yeah, that's just because those calculations are made for you in the flight equipment, and I can assure you they are not.
Right.
That's absolute fiction. Doesn't happen that way. Somebody was asking me a question the other day about, well, they have to teach you about Coriolis, and I think he was the guy, Jazakonda, I think. He was the guy that basically said, hey, Jeran, I'll pay for you to sit through the FAA meteorology and navigation exam so that you can understand that Coriolis effect is all powerful in considering your route, which, I responded to that, and I just thought, that is patently absurd. And we got into this discussion, and he ultimately wound up saying, oh, well, I was just talking about weather anyway and the cloud spinning patterns. And I almost responded to him and said, if you look at the cloud patterns on an azimuthal equidistant map, and
Right.
you know which one I'm talking about, suddenly all these weather patterns make a whole lot of sense. And suddenly, if you factor in the sun and the moon and their circuit as they travel around the Earth, you can see that there is a huge amount of correlation between those movements and weather patterns and sea patterns and tides and everything. I mean, it all
It
seems
would
to
also
come
answer
together.
the Foucault.
Yes,
Exactly.
Because, that was another debate I got into with somebody about Foucault pendulum. It's like, they always say, oh, well, it has to be because of the Earth's rotation. Well, first of all, it is far from a consistent effect. It seems like it will reverse directions periodically, and there is no explanation for that in a ball Earth model. However, in a flat Earth model, when you have the convergence of the sun and the moon at certain points above the circle of the Earth, suddenly those are the factors that can affect the Foucault pendulum to change directions. And
Right.
that is
Yep.
in fact what actually happens. So, I mean, there's so many very reasonable explanations for these on a flat Earth model. Whereas, like I've said, multiple times, on a ball Earth model, Foucault pendulum just will not fly. It cannot fly
No.
because it just doesn't add up. And especially to explain the type of behavior that it does, where it periodically reverses directions. I mean, there is no explanation for that in the ball Earth model.
No, it just doesn't work. And that's
Right.
why I think, for me, there's enough proof out there with those other things. That's why I think that the test tonight is big, because I think it'll wake a few people up that maybe are on the fence for some reason, or if we can start expanding that distance, when these are clear, I could see how somebody could look at the Chicago skyline, I guess, and think, okay, maybe that's some sort of atmospheric reflection or refraction or some sort of mirage. I could understand where they might have a problem with that. It doesn't look like the actual buildings, well, obviously, because it's 60 miles away. And so even on the clearest of all days, you're not going to see a good image from that distance. But I think when you start talking 8 miles and what should be a clear proof tonight, and then, with that light, I can't wait to see what it looks like at night. But I mean, from what I can tell so far, I think it would be able to go quite a bit distant further, up to the 13 or 15, and if you get to that point, that should be enough to get people to really say, okay, hold on a second, because people won't listen to, I mean, what's easy for me is when you talk about, now I've been going with California to Florida, or California to Hawaii, or California to New York. All those are about 2,500 miles, give or take. And when you do the math on that, that's 789 miles of curvature, not feet. These are miles. And if you just think of what 789 miles of curvature is, it's impossible. The ISS is 250 miles in the air.
Yes.
So where are you getting 789 miles of curvature? And on top of that, then I was writing to somebody and I said, I know that there's a few mountains between California and New York. You've got a few in Colorado. We've got some in the Sierras. And at max, they're 3 miles high. And
the Continental Divide is here in Colorado. So yes.
Yeah. And the sad thing about those is you go up and then you come back down too. So it's not even like you can consider that part of the curve. It's just asinine when you talk about mountains, huge mountain ranges that are 3 miles high. And yet, in order for the Earth to be a ball, somehow we got to come up with 789 miles of curvature just in the United States. It's ridiculous. You would be able to put a bowling ball in Colorado at the top of the hill. That thing should take off and roll all the way to me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not going to happen. But
somebody made a comment. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was actually writing things down, so I wasn't looking at the chat.
I was going to say, somebody made a comment on the chat that said something to the effect, well, so an altimeter is worthless then. Well, no, not hardly. And basically, you have to understand how altimeters work. They work off of barometric pressure. So if we were truly in this constant dive all the time, logic would dictate that the barometric pressure would constantly increase, which would show your altitude going down and down and down, because obviously the further you go down, the heavier the atmosphere becomes, the barometric pressure responds accordingly. So, the fact is that you're not, and not only that, if it was a ball Earth and you kept a level flight, and there is an instrument in the cockpit that shows your, level flight in relation to the horizon, as the Earth would drop away, then also the air pressure would decrease and the altimeter would show you climbing and climbing and climbing. That does not happen. The only time that happens is when you actually adjust the yoke on the airplane so that your elevator, forces you up in a nose up position or a nose down position. Other than that, once you get to flight altitude, you stay there until you are either otherwise instructed by flight control, or there is some weather factor that would necessitate you changing your altitude for whatever reason. So yeah, just wanted to address that.
Well, good. I think those are the kind of things that are just more and more proof to me that there's got to be a way that besides this. I mean, I don't know if you heard Mark Sargent's show the other night. He was trying to come up with some tests, and some of them were pretty outrageous as far as renting a boat and going around Antarctica and stuff like that. But I think once you've broken the curvature rule, that has to be in effect. And yeah, granted, it doesn't have to be. There could be a 4-mile stretch somewhere that does have no curve, But for every one of those, that means that there's a 4-mile stretch that has, a much larger curve.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we kind of start doing these tests, and if it's something simple like this light and 8 miles, well, we could get 5, 6, 10 of these tests done around the country, around the world. Then I think from there, somebody's going to have to answer the question is, are we on a ball? And we know what that answer is going to be.
Oh, yeah.
So
absolutely.
I see a couple people asking if the test is still on. So yes, test is on. Probably would go live. If we did, it would be because I like to make sure I don't lose battery power now. So it would be after 8, sometime between 8 and 8:30 would be my guess. I did check the tides. Tides are not where they were last time, thank God. So they are calm. The swell's like 2 feet. Waves are 3 feet. So I have nothing blocking me yet.
Yeah, Jeran, one thing I've thought of before when you've been doing these tests is do you think it'd be possible to bring up a Ustream feed on Melissa's phone and actually have both sides of the test kind of being broadcast? I guess you could bring up 2 separate windows of the Ustream chat or Ustream and watch that. But I just thought it would be kind of neat if you could actually see both sides of it.
I thought that too. The problem with that is somehow we need to communicate. So that's the issue, is that you can't.
Well, you could communicate obviously through the chat itself, but that's right. You would have to have like an iPad or something also to watch her, and vice versa.
Yeah, but I might be able to. I've got a friend that might go with us tonight, and if he does, then that would actually fix it. And now, what we tried to do last time, and this is what the stupid problem with her phone getting wet was, is we get there early enough to where she has me zeroed in on the camera already, so that we don't need to communicate. For instance, if she already sees me in the camera, she knows where the light is, and then we go live. And at that point, we don't need, both of us can be on the Ustream. Does that make sense? Because
yeah, it does.
Right. So that's what we might try tonight. We wanted to get there about 7:30 anyway, because I wanted to get some pictures of the water coming up to the eye level. And then again, there's still that band of clouds that sits out there on the horizon. I don't like to be the kind of guy that says they're putting it out there, but it certainly is something I don't remember ever seeing before. So it's impossible to see boats go over the horizon like you see on these videos, because there's a fog layer that just sits out there at the horizon. Well, the boats just disappear in the fog well before they get to the horizon. So hopefully that's not today, but the last couple of times we've been there, it's definitely been there. I'd have no reason to doubt it'll be there again today. So anyway, yes, the test is going on. Let me see if there's any more questions before we move along. So Bob, you know what I think would be awesome? I don't know, we'll talk about it later, but I would love to do this weekly with you, because I think that you've got some good knowledge. And if we kind of do like a little weekly, just to follow up on what's happened that week. And it helps me to give people a chance to ask questions. And I always feel bad when I'm going through emails and seeing emails that are 4 or 5 days old where somebody just asked a simple question. It's like, God damn, I wish I would have seen this. Or comments where somebody asks an easy question. I'm like 4 or 5 days out.
Yeah, that and the chat window just seems to go by so fast.
I know, I'm trying to watch this. See,
if you're not checking it every 5 seconds, it's like it's gone.
Yeah, I'm scrolling up right now and seeing if I'm missing anything. Jeranism doesn't look like he sounds. Anyone agree? Thanks. I don't know what that means, but let's see here.
Who puts the fog there? Chemtrailers? Well, chemtrails are kind of an interesting.
Bob's got a lot of information on that.
Yeah, I've done a lot of research on chemtrails, and NASA has since gone public with the fact that they are spraying, and they have basically made the statement that well, what we're doing is we're putting these particulates in the air to reflect sunlight back into space to reduce the global warming phenomenon. Well, that's all fine and good, and that may sound good on paper to some people, but if you look into what these compounds that they're spraying can actually be used for, and this is something, by the way, that has also disappeared to a large degree from the web, from when I was originally researching this. But the primary ingredients that turn up in chemtrails are aluminum, barium, and strontium. And at one point, I thought this was very interesting. Clifford Carnicom years ago also found a biological element to them in the form of type O negative red blood cells. And it's like, wow, that's interesting, because I believe O negative is the universal donor type. So that's kind of scary, because it's like, okay, so what are they doing and putting in, that they need a universal donor blood type to be able to get into people's system. And then of course shortly after that a new health disease emerged called oh
I know what you're talking about too, the
Morgellons disease.
Morgellons,
yeah, Morgellons. And it's interesting because in the Morgellons disease, if you look at some of the lesions, you can pull this up on Google Pictures, but if you look at some of the lesions, it appears like there are little fiber optic cables or fiber optic strands that are growing out of lesions in people's skins, and they're all different colors. Absolutely bizarre phenomenon. And some physicists and molecular biologists were actually looking at these and believe that they found the presence of nanotechnology or nanobots inside of these things. And that was really starting to cross into the sci-fi zone for me, and frankly, it kind of freaked me out. So I stopped following it after that. But getting back to my original point, when I was doing this research, one of the things that I found, and you can even read this now about strontium barium niobate, which is basically a storage method for holograms. And that's basically what it's sold as now. But probably 5 or 6 years ago, there were many, many corporate websites and university studies that were published that basically said, okay, if you are going to create a large-scale hologram, one of the very best things that you can put in the atmosphere or as a medium to project onto is this composition of barium and strontium. And of course, I would imagine that the aluminum would have its property in there, and this is just speculation on my part, as far as maybe being able to bring up the brightness or the vividness of the hologram being projected. And you've seen many, many interesting phenomena going around on YouTube. One of the most interesting that I've seen recently is in China, they were able to manifest an entire city holographically out of absolutely nothing. And it's the most stunning thing you've ever seen. It's on YouTube. You can check it out.
Wow.
And, between that, people may remember also back in 2012, there was a big thing going around on YouTube where they have these really weird sounding sounds that are being heard in very specific and isolated places all over the world. And
Canada and stuff up there, I heard a bunch too.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, if I was going to make a scary UFO soundtrack, those are probably the sounds that I would want to put in, because they're just spooky sounding.
It sounds like dinosaurs or like the gears of the earth or something.
Something like that. Yeah, it's strange. And then so when I started looking at holographic sound projection, and it turns out that the government holds a patent on this that is over 15 years old, where they can literally take and beam an audio signal right at a person, and it can be absolutely deafening.
Can it kill them?
Possibly, conceivably, I would say. I don't know, but I mean, and the person standing right next to him can't hear a thing.
Wow.
So when you hear about these things like, oh, well, there's going to be this alien invasion, or Jesus is coming back, and all these people are going to hear their Messiah speaking to them in their native tongues. Well, kind of looks like we've got that technology available right here, right now, to do that. So, I've always wondered about that. It's just fascinating stuff.
So, Bob, you don't have a channel, right? Somebody was asking that.
No, not really. I just have my name. I haven't made any videos. I'm thinking about it, but
he's thinking about it. But so I saw somebody here who said, frustrated that the flat earthers avoid all the strong points against flat Earth. So I don't know why you would just write that.
Huh? Yeah. What would those be?
Go ahead and say something. But again, what we're trying to point out is that there's just as many, if not several times more, issues with the ball Earth. And so we don't just settle with, well, there's 10 problems with the flat Earth and only 8 with the round Earth, so now it's round. We're not trying to do that, and I'm not trying to prove that the Earth is flat. I'm just trying to show that somebody's been lying, and when the people who are lying are scientists who are the ones who get to go around and say, look up science is fake on Google, and all you'll get is memes talking about how great science is, and how science doesn't care what your beliefs are. Yes, they do. They care what their beliefs are. They certainly don't care what mine are. But
yeah, they wouldn't hire an army of shills if they didn't care what our beliefs were. Right.
Yep. So let me see. I did see a couple other questions. Somebody asked about the lack of circumnavigation around Antarctica, and that's absolutely true. In fact, there's no report of anybody that I know of ever circumnavigating the Earth north to south.
Well, there is a reason for that too. Besides the obvious reason in the flat Earth model,
right.
But that would be because even if the Earth was a sphere, there is a treaty in place that prohibits anything like that from going over it, coming near it. You can't even get fuel within,
right,
a certain degree of latitude.
Now, I've got about half of a video done, and it's going to take me a while to finish it, but I do want to get it out. That I was actually detailing Captain Cook's journey, and when you see what they say that he did, either he was the absolute worst navigator of all time, which we know is not true, or he went around the flat Earth, because he went 3 years and 70,000 miles, and when they draw it out, they basically have it. He went up and down and up and down and up and down, because they don't want to show you that the path that he took could not have possibly taken that long. And in fact, if you look up his second journey, which is the one where he went around, and just follow along with it, he is constantly pissed off, because every time he gets to a point, he recalculates his position and he's off. He's constantly off latitude and longitude. Mm-hmm. He's pissed off about it. And he keeps getting to a point where he says, we hit this ice wall again, and as far as we can see to the right and as far as we can see to the left, this thing does not end. And basically after 3 years, he gives up and says there is no southern continent. Now, if you look at the International Oceanic Organization, the IOO, they flat out say that he was the first one ever to circumnavigate Antarctica. But you can read flat out in his paperwork that he quit and said there's no such thing, that there is no way around it, that the way he described it was it is connected to the pole. Now, that might sound like what he's saying is that it's a ball and Antarctica is at the bottom and it's connected to the pole, which would be true on the pole. But what he's saying is
it's true on the flat Earth too.
Right. He can't get around it, is what he's saying. And he's not going in the circular pattern that he envisions, because the poor guy was told that we lived on a sphere, and so he would never think anything else, and he was going the other way and just could not, and think that much of a distance is not like, I'm making a clear right turn here.
Right.
That's not the thing that was happening. It's interesting. Another thing that they've talked about for years that I figured out exactly why they don't do it. They've talked about running a railroad track from the United States, they just need to get across the, is that the Bering Strait up there between Alaska and Russia?
Yes.
Right. They said we just need to get across that, and we'll be able to have a railroad track that will go from the United States around into Russia, ending in around Mongolia or something.
Mhm.
And they keep shutting it down and saying, nope, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Well, the reason why is because in that situation, you would be able to see the train tracks make right turns. You know,
Right.
if it's a flat Earth where they can't, they would never be able to do that. So I always tell people, you'll never see that. You'll never ever see a train track like that, because it would clearly show, hey, we should be going straight around a ball, but we're going straight and making 45-degree turns around this Earth.
Right. And one thing that's really important, I think, for people to understand about navigating, the ball Earth versus the flat Earth model, is that the ball Earth is basically modeled as a bar magnet, if you will. In other words, it has two distinct poles. So allegedly, you have the North Pole and you have the South Pole, and anybody, from elementary school can look at a bar magnet and visualize that very same effect. But in the flat Earth model, it's a little bit different type of magnet, and the best analogy to it would be to take a speaker, a magnet off of a back of a speaker, which is a round disc, where the center of that magnet would be considered the North Pole, just like it is in the flat Earth model, and the entire outer edge is the southern pole of the magnet. So that's why ships navigators for centuries have always made their navigations in reference to north, because when they tried to do it in reference to south, they completely got lost, turned around, catastrophic effects. It just doesn't work that way, because like I said, the southern pole of the magnet is virtually all around us.
Right. And that's another thing that I think should be, if it wasn't for, Africa and South America being right dab in the middle, that there's a problem with when you look at the equator, obviously the equator on the round Earth would be, pretty close to the equator on the flat Earth. But on the flat Earth, the degree, let's say the Tropic of Cancer, the distance to go around that would be twice as small as the distance to go around the Tropic of Capricorn. So that's something that should be able to be proven pretty easily too, because the southern hemisphere is actually double the size that we would have on the globe. But the problem with that is that's not really a navigatable area, because a boat can't go through. It's going to have to go underneath underneath Africa and then underneath South America. So by then, now they've made up the distance in the miles, because it's crazy the amount of miles that these ships that have circumnavigated the southern hemisphere have gone. They've gone 60,000 miles plus. The British ship Challenger, Captain Cook, even Magellan, who never even finished his trip. But that trip took 3 years also. Imagine that. It's 36 months. I think I did the math one time at the 60,000. Even if you took, because I don't think they said his total miles, because at that time they weren't really. I think they lost his paperwork from what I remember. And actually they've got a logbook from somebody that basically they just made up. He's a guy that the author of the logbook for Magellan, who was the first one to circumnavigate, wasn't on any of the ship registries. He wasn't even supposed to be on the boat, but they said that at the last second, he basically just wanted to go on a vacation and basically got to just go on this boat. And he's not on any of the paperwork, and the excuse is, well, since he's not on any of the daily ship records about who has to swab the deck and do all these chores, he had plenty of time to write. So that's why. And he didn't know Magellan was going to die, so he just was writing just by pure chance. And then I've read where it says, well, thank God we don't have to look at some of the boring stuff like the actual tracking and the mileage, because he was just writing about other things about the boat. It's like, yeah, we don't want that important information like mileage and where they were located. But 3 years to go 25,000 miles is ridiculous.
Yes.
I mean, just figure that out. I think I figured it out one day. It's like 600 miles a month.
Yeah, it's at a crawl.
Yeah. Take that and divide it by 30 days. Now you're talking, 10 or 20 miles a day. They're not making very good time. So, but if they went 60,000 miles or 70,000 miles like Cook, that makes a little bit more sense. And I'm pretty sure it would have to be at least 70,000 miles around, right? On the flat Earth model.
Oh yeah, I would say so.
Maybe even more.
I've never actually done the math for that, but then again, there's so many variables that
yeah.
are
How would you even know? I mean,
it's hard to tell precisely.
Let me see if there's any final questions here.
Okay. One other thing that I'll also mention about that I've never really understood about the magnetics of the ball Earth model is that we are all taught that the core of the Earth is basically this molten molten core that's just very, very hot. And we were also taught that when a magnet gets extremely hot like that it loses all of its permeability. So you have to wonder, how could the Earth have this magnetic field if the core of it is absolutely red hot? It's like, well, it kind of defies their own physics once again. So that never added up either.
I've got some cool old physics videos that are actually really funny, but they're actually trying to explain everything, and they always refer to the pole star and to the pole. It's really funny because I don't know if they hadn't adopted the whole idea of the South Pole yet, which would be interesting, but they never say anything about a South Pole or a South Pole star or the pole stars. It's very clear that they say, all the stars circle around the pole star. And, when going over the magnetic north, they just never mention the south. And these are videos from probably, I don't know if they're the 40s, 50s, somewhere in there. But I always found that interesting that it's the pole star, not the pole stars.
Exactly.
So molten lava, I guess, in the center,
Yep. And,
can you believe that company that I called out for the moon watch?
Oh, geez, I know.
I saw that. I almost lost it. I said, come on.
It was right up there with that moon rock that was given as a gift to some member of royalty, and they had it checked out, and it was nothing.
The petrified wood?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, that sounds about right. Just call it, oh, yeah, this is legitimate, genuine, certified. We have a certificate of authenticity, so it's real.
I'm thinking about writing NASA and just saying, hey, I'm interested in buying this watch, and just making sure that you've certified that it's because there's no way. First of all, they make no mention of NASA. So they're not even saying NASA has certified this. They're just saying we certified this as moon dust. So I'm assuming if NASA ever found out that they were doing that, unless they're in on it, I mean, what are they going to say if I write that and say, hey, I'm going to buy this. I'm thinking about buying this $150,000 watch. I just want to make sure it's real moon dust. I mean, remember that girl that had that moon dust that was given to her husband? NASA set her up at Denny's and stole it from her.
Yeah, I heard about that. That's nuts.
I mean, otherwise, I'll spend $150,000 and then just break it. I want to test this moon dust.
Exactly. So one of the other things also I noticed that going by in the chat is, people are talking about curved water. And one example that I saw that was just crazy was, somebody took and filled up a glass of water to the point where it was actually up over the top of.
Lovely.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, see, there it is. There's your curved water. And it's like, no, that is called surface tension, and that is a very temporary and very conditional effect. Other than that, water does not curve. It always seeks to level itself out. But
I think they've done, isn't it called a meniscus? Like if you put water in a test tube, the water adheres to the side of the glass. So technically, it would make a little bucket. You may not even be perceptible with your eye, but it makes a little curve, but it's because of the glass on the side that is higher than the level of the water. And then the opposite is true with mercury. Mercury inside of a test tube would actually form like a ball.
Yes.
Yeah, because it doesn't touch the sides of the glass.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I don't know, just some crazy examples. That just goes to show you that, these people will really, really reach to give an example of curved water or
this
whatever.
Guy here, I don't know who Jalapeno Agent is, but he says, just call everything fake because there's no such thing as telescopes. I don't know if you were listening, but Bob has a telescope. He's got an awesome telescope. He actually sent me pictures of Saturn that amaze me because I've never seen pictures like that. But it's a very distorted image that could or could not be a sphere. Kind of looks flat to me. But again, we've all been conditioned to see Saturn as this round sphere. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, there's no way you could look at that and make the assumption right away and say, yep, this is a ball that is, we can go land there on these other planets. There's just no way. It's not.
Right. Well, and people will say, yeah, I look at the pictures and through my telescope and I see a sphere. It's like, no, you don't see a sphere. You see a circle. And the only thing that converts that circle, that point of light that you see in the sky with the naked eye, to the circle that you see through the telescope is the convexness of the lens in the telescope.
Right.
Now, granted, you do see some rings around Saturn, but I'll tell you, my Meade, and I've got it for everybody out there that knows anything about telescopes, I've got a Meade LX200. It's a 10-inch. And it's got all the bells and whistles on it and stuff. And yeah, I sent Jeran a picture of what I see when I look at Saturn, and it is such a far cry from what NASA shows. And granted, they're supposed to have much better telescopes, but then again, my images of Pluto are not all that different than the ones that they used to speculate on.
I would like, Bob, if you sent me a 5 or 6 of those pictures, I'll do a quick video just to show people what you see through your telescope, because I was pretty impressed. I remember looking through a telescope as a kid. I can honestly admit I haven't done it in years, but I never saw anything like Saturn like that through a telescope. Or I believe you showed me a picture that had Jupiter with 1 or 2 moons showing, right?
Yeah, it had Europa, Ganymede, Io, and oh crap, I forgot the other one. But yeah, basically Jupiter and its 4 moons, and they just appear, as Jupiter itself appears as a little ball, but the moons just appear as tiny dots, lights.
Now, can you see them orbit, or is that something that you like? It would take days, or how long is their orbit?
I have seen them change positions. Yes, I haven't actually watched them orbit, and honestly, you don't look at through the telescope that long.
Right.
I haven't really looked at what the orbital period is, but I can tell you that yes, the moons do change positions, from the time to time that I look at Jupiter. But I mean, again, the resolution is nowhere near, what NASA purports that it is, and that's always kind of taken me back. Granted,
I was gonna say what people don't even know is there's reports of Jupiter going in front of the moon, several reports of Mars going in front of the moon. These things are in the Astronomical Society documents. That so this is something we need to watch, because I think they kind of take our minds off some of these things on purpose around the time. So I've been trying to wait. My last picture of the sun that had those moon spots was the exact period that Mars was supposed to be behind the sun. So again, I'm not making claims that the sunspots are Mars, but it certainly does look like they coincide. The time periods when we see these big sunspots, their planets are rotating in the line with us and the sun. So it is a possibility that maybe they are coming in front. Maybe they're just lights. Maybe they're little specks of firmament. Who knows? Right. But what I'm trying to say is that just to say, oh, you don't believe in telescopes because telescopes show us everything there is. They don't. They don't. Nobody can really even see Jupiter like they show it. I'm sorry, Pluto.
It's nothing more than a dot in the sky to me. With my best
even through the telescope, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
with my highest map. So.
Right. So I mean, those are the kind of things where I think people to say you're still taking NASA's word for it and calling it, God's word, basically, saying that they can make no mistakes when we can clearly show they make several mistakes and they lie all the time. And so just to take their word for it and say, oh, well, I trust them, I think these things are real, it's crazy.
And even the stuff they've released is absolutely inconsistent. Look how many different pictures there are and have been of Pluto that NASA has released, where it's different colors, different structures. It's like, come on, really? There's
Right.
no sense of uniformity to it at all. They're all completely different. Everything you could possibly imagine. Sometimes you see planets with rings around them. Sometimes you don't. And I'm not saying that there aren't objects up there that are moving around that we're calling planets, because clearly there are. But when people come forward and they say stuff like, "Oh, well, I've witnessed the ISS go fly over the top," all I can say is, yes, I have too, according to what NASA has broadcast, for when these flight times are going to be overhead. And yes, I've watched that. However, I've never been able to track them with my telescope because, frankly, it moves way, way too fast. And the other thing that people say is, "Oh, well, I've seen satellites. I've seen satellites." And to me, that's crazy, because they're basically saying that they can see an object that is the size of a bus from anywhere from 250 to 26,000 miles up in space. And just the whole notion of that is patently absurd. And then they go, well, what is it that we're seeing? And I can't honestly answer that, but what I can tell you is that for hundreds of years, people have identified strange moving lights in the sky, whether they're rogue planets as described in the Bible or what they are, I don't know. But I do know that they've been around much longer than we've allegedly had satellite technology.
Yeah, you should go check out Crow 777's channel, because I was watching his video the other day called "Nothing is What It Appears," or "Everything's Different Than What It Appears." He actually shows, because he videotapes the moon like every night, and he's got 2 or 3 shots of what I guess are satellites, but they're just little flimsy pieces of like dust. It basically looks like they go floating in front of the moon. It is crazy. Have you seen the pictures of people who say they take pictures of the ISS in front of the moon or the sun?
Yeah, and that's another thing that is beautifully debunked at Clues Forum.
Oh, good.
It's just absurd. Yeah, they actually calculate all the angles and
it's nonsense.
Prove them complete frauds, with the math. For all you people are out there that are saying, "Show me the math, show me the math." Clues Forum uses the math, gives you the perspective, and shows you the absolute impossibility that those images could be real in any sense of the word.
And I want to link everybody up to that video that TJ did for me when Red's Rhetoric went through and did the math on the distance of the moon, and got a friend of his to say what degree the moon was at, where she was and where he was. And then he threw in, well, we've got to add such and such degree change for the curvature of the Earth. And when he threw that in, his number came out with 238,000 miles. And so he said, haha, the moon can't possibly be 3,000 miles away. Well, TJ went back and did the math again. And this time all he did was leave out the curvature of the Earth degrees, or the curvature of the Earth number. And sure enough, the math came back to about 3,400 miles. So pretty crazy. I'm going to link that video to you guys, because I thought that was awesome for him to go back and do it. When I saw it and saw that he was doing it the way he was, I just said, forget it, because what you're doing is, again, using the math that is based on the presupposition that we are a ball.
Exactly.
Right. And if you do that, well, then, of course, if you think that it's not going to work out, you're crazy, because that's what it's based on. And that's what all their numbers are based on. I mean, think about how you would figure out the distance to the sun. I mean, how would you ever come up with that number unless you had the size of the sun or the distance from Earth? You couldn't come up with that number.
Right.
Yet when you build it backwards, you can come up with the number, because nobody can disprove it, because your number that you just built it upon is where you got the number from. So people think that Copernicus, and Galileo were these great scientific geniuses, which they brought. You have to remember that the church was the intelligentsia. They were the ones setting up astronomical viewings or observatories. They were the scientific ones of the time, and these guys, they were religious too. But what I'm saying is, when they brought them this information and said, hey, we think that the sun is actually in the center and the Earth goes around the sun, they had no evidence whatsoever. So imagine, it would have been crazy for the church just to say, oh, you're right, our Bible is wrong, and we don't feel ourselves spinning at all, but you're right, we're spinning. They had no proof. So they told them, stop saying that. And people say, oh, how persecuted Galileo was. He wasn't persecuted. He was first told, don't say that anymore. And then he came back and wrote a book about it, saying it again. And then they gave him house arrest. So think of the Catholic Church. They burned people at the stake. They would kill you, kill you for having the wrong book in your house. But they liked Galileo very much and just kept telling him, do not go around saying that the earth goes around the sun because we don't feel ourselves moving. You're not giving us any evidence. Copernicus's evidence isn't matching up with, Copernicus hadn't figured out anything other than circular orbits, so nothing was matching the sky. So it just bothers me when people come across and say, oh, like these guys are gods, and oh, how great Galileo's idea was. And Galileo stole that from Copernicus and then tried to present it as fact when he had no evidence. And
exactly.
even when he was done, he came up with 3 million miles for the distance to the sun. And then it was 12 million, then it was 27 million, and now it's 93 million.
Right.
So,
and then they reference each other, as if these hypotheses were actually fact.
right.
And that is just a huge, huge problem in my book.
Yeah.
So,
The whole thing is, I even look it up and it'll say Copernicus was the first one to prove that prove? What do you mean prove? It hasn't been proven today.
yeah, he didn't prove anything.
There's no proof today that we circle the sun. So, of course, science will tell you that there's proof, but they base their proof off the Foucault pendulum. They, the things that they base their proof off of, we're saying there's other things that prove those events, that prove those. So that's what is so bothersome is basically, if you really think about it and really divide it out and figure out what's going on here, it's somebody had one idea and somebody had another. And rather than go through what would be scientific, debating, testing, calculating, trying to disprove each other, one group took off and said, we're right, you're wrong. And they knew that people were probably a little fed up with the church because obviously the church had been running the world for years and killing people and doing things that the church shouldn't have been doing. And so it was very easy for them to say, hey, let's create this union of like-minded people who will say this is the facts and that the church and their dumb book are no match for our intelligence. And that's how it went ahead into the 1700s and 1800s. And then they picked up new, all the other things along the way. And then they got Einstein to basically write relativity to help them prove their model. And relativity can't be proven any more than anything else. And so what you have is basically a school system set up on an idea versus another idea. And neither one of them have been proven true. And now you've got a group who is fighting teeth and nail to keep their theory at the top. The reason why is because every one of their jobs and every bit of money that's ever gone into any kind of scientific endeavor was put to back a model that may not necessarily be true. And that's great. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because I just wanted to see some proof. Show me that it's true, and they can't. And they can't prove it right, so now we got a problem.
Yeah, it's so convoluted. They have to make this model unnecessarily complex, to basically confuse people or baffle them with bullshit rather than dazzle them with the simple brilliance of something like TJ's model, where he refuted Red's debunking video and said, okay, yeah, sure, I'm going to use simple Pythagorean equations. And if we are assuming that we are on a ball Earth, then yes, the math that he did is absolutely correct. However, if we assume that we are on a flat Earth and using those very same Pythagorean equations, it proves exactly what you said. And with the model of the sun and the moon being roughly 3,000 miles up. So I mean, it works both ways. So they just have to make it all convoluted and confusing and just baffle everybody with bullshit instead of just displaying the simple elegance that it actually is.
Yeah, I'm certainly not saying, I saw somebody says Jeranism hates math. I'm certainly not saying, and if you think I'm saying that math is incorrect, or I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination, math works. The problem with it is, and even Einstein has said it, that, you have to prove the reality first, and then math can help you to get numbers easier, rather than have to go up
Exactly.
and measure. Right. Math can then take care of work for you, but you can't start with math and say, this is the proof, and then work from there, because what you have is not necessarily what's happening in reality. And like we both said, you can make a math equation prove anything. So the fact that their math proves that the sun is 93 million miles away proves nothing more than in that model that the sun would be 93 million miles away. So
yeah, the math is worthless without the empirical observation or the technology to bring it into being, to bring what the math is saying into being. Like I was saying earlier about, math proves that, time can flow either direction, but how do you actually make that happen?
Right.
Just like, math, again, you can make an equation to define any set of circumstances. And this is done quite often in what Mark Sargent, talks about in video games. You can do the impossible in video games with the math, but because you don't actually have to bring it into a physical manifestation, but rather just a virtual type of reality, then
Right.
suddenly it's real, right? So,
and that's why I like that game Kerbals. I don't know if you've ever seen that game. There's some space game Kerbals where everything works perfectly. Every rocket launch, it mathematically works. And we're not saying that the math on a globe wouldn't work, but in reality, human beings cannot live on a globe.
Oh, believe me, they've gone through every extent to prove that the math for the globe works. And I mean, and you can see this in the unbelievably beautiful orbital patterns of the planets, how they come out looking like mandalas, and everything is so beautifully tied to the phi ratio. Yes, so yes, they have gone to extreme lengths to demonstrate that the math, can do many, many things, but actually proving a model with it, or disproving a model with it, is a little bit different story.
Right. And so to me, the easiest way to do that is with the curvature of a 25,000 mile circumference ball, because with that curvature comes an exponential growth of curve with the further distance you're looking. So yeah, 4 miles was only 10 feet of 10 feet behind the curvature, but then you jump out to 8 miles, and I think now it's like 64. Again, we're only looking for 16 tonight because with the camera being 4 feet high, and I always like to leave a lot of room for debate. I don't want to make it exact, so that's why we bring it down to so little. But I mean, then you go to 13 miles, and 13 miles is over 100 feet. And then you get out, like we said, 2,500 miles is 789 miles. So to me, it's already been proven just in that alone. There's no way anybody can show that measurement. When you think of something that's only like 60 miles away, like Chicago is from Michigan, and you're talking about 3,000, that's a half a mile. That means those buildings are a half a mile below the curvature of the Earth, and we can see them standing up right there on a clear day. So once you see that, then you see where they've messed up, is that their idea was great. They had a great little setup. It was working for years, but it was only a matter of time until cameras got where they are now. Cameras are absolutely incredible. Did you get your camera yet, Bob?
No, not yet. I am so excited about that. But, yeah, it hasn't been, I don't think it's been released in the United States yet.
Oh, wow.
But if anybody's wondering, I ordered a Nikon Coolpix P90 camera, which just recently set a world record zoom.
I saw the video of the plane tail.
Unbelievable.
That was insane.
It planes at 40,000 feet, and you can zoom in and actually read the tail number off of it. So I'm very excited to put that in concert with, our lights that we just got, the 6,510 lumen lights. And I think we can easily probably do some 40 to 50 mile shots between the camera and the light that will, utterly disprove anything. The other thing I thought was crazy also, I might mention about the weatherman who was showing, saying that this was a Chicago skyline.
Yeah, it's a mirage.
Being a mirage, it's like, people obviously don't understand how mirages work, but one of the main characteristics that you will see in a mirage is an inverted image above it. It will actually appear inverted, and that image was absolutely clear as a bell. So, you know, the
Yeah.
notion that that was a mirage is just patently absurd.
And mirages break the image apart. They completely convolute it. They don't piece it back together
No.
in perfect form, and
And
somehow
clarity.
and pulled it right up to the point of the right up to where the horizon is and right facing you. And yeah, I mean, these are the kind of things where once I started to see this, it wasn't a matter of, well, you know, do I think the earth is flat, or do I think I just know it can't be a ball based on what they've described it as. And the fact that they're fighting it, well, then you get to the point where you have to realize, well, if somebody's fighting a falsity, if somebody's fighting a lie, then there's something deeply behind it. And when you really get into it and start looking deeper than that, you see that it's pushing the evolutionary Big Bang model, the no God model, the we're all accidents, we're all minuscule, you know, we're floating in space and we're just a tiny planet of trillions of planets. You see that the science just found Earth 2.0, they say, Earth's cousin, you know, 130,000 light years away or whatever stupid number it is, which is just outrageous. Like, why would we even talk about that? There's no reason that human beings at this point in our evolution, at this point in our growth, would even care about something that distance away. It is a waste of time. Whoever typed that article out or whoever wrote any information down about that, it's a waste of time. I mean, we have so many things on this planet to worry about. Got the Keystone Pipeline breaking down I mean, think about that. We're shipping oil from Canada down to Texas through a pipe, yet California is in the worst drought I've seen in my lifetime. And we've got too much water in the East Coast. So instead of making a pipeline from New York to California to move water, something that's essential for humans to live, they'd rather ship oil that the damn pipe breaks every 2 weeks. It's just crazy. It's crazy.
And the other thing that's weird about that too is, I mean, there's been several documentaries showing where, you know, we're actually exporting a lot of our water out to China, where these super tankers are coming in and collecting, and since they can't pull the water out of the Great Lakes and stuff,
Right.
They are actually pulling it from the rivers and streams and feeds to the Great Lakes. And so they're going down and down and down. And there's also another guy who I follow and really like a lot. His YouTube channel is called Professor Doom 1. And he has uncovered some very interesting stuff at the Hoover Dam and also with Lake Mead, where after there was a major earthquake in that area, I guess a couple months ago.
Is that Arizona? Lake Mead?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And basically what happened is after that earthquake struck, the Lake Mead actually dropped something like 12 or 13 inches. I mean, instantaneously overnight, where if you look at the data, it was going up and down by just hundredths or fractions of an inch, you know, every day previous and since then. And of course, he actually came forward with visible proof of that, because the officials at Lake Mead came forward and said, oh, no, that was just a sensor malfunction. But it's like, it would be odd. It would be one thing if it was one sensor that was showing it, but it was all of them that were showing it. And then so what Doom did is he talked to his readers about it, and they submitted some photos that actually showed very clearly that the levels had dropped off drastically, you know, in a 1 or 2 day time period, and I don't know what's going on with that. I don't know if some sort of fissure opened up underneath or if they're purposely draining it off, but there's something very strange going on there, and Professor Doom 1 is very, very closely monitoring it.
Oh. Well, I know I talked about boycotting Columbus Day, which I'll never celebrate or mention again because I think it's ridiculous. The other company that you should definitely boycott, if at all possible, is Nestle, which owns a ton of stuff, but they are coming into California and bottling their water right out of the ground. Like I said, we're in the worst drought I've seen in my 35 years. And I've always lived here. And I mean, I've seen some of these reservoirs, I've never seen them even close to as low as they are right now. We can't get any rain, and yet these guys are coming in, bottling water. And I just looked up their profits yesterday, and their profits, this is just profits for 2014, was something $24.9 billion.
On water.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes me crazy because, you know, all they're doing is just handing $1 billion here and $1 billion here to these politicians and getting to do whatever they want. And it's, you know, getting back to my point was we have so many things like that to worry about on this earth, things that are going on like that are just theft of natural resources, things that we all should share. There's plenty of water, there's plenty of food. I mean, I think I've said it before to people on my channel that whether they realize it or not, starting tomorrow, the earth could take care of every single human being on this planet with food, with water, with shelter, with clothing for absolutely $0. It could happen tomorrow. And
punt the corporations, that would be a big help.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is that we've got people who have moved in and said, nope, we own this now, and you will buy it from us until we're rich and powerful. And that's just the way it goes. And it's nonsense because, I mean, look at all the look at all the fruit. I mean, think about it. You plant an apple seed, the apple tree grows, and then there's 100 apples, and then there's 100 apple seeds in those apples. You could have, you know, 1,000 apple trees in a year. And think of all the fruits and vegetables that everyone could eat for free. And instead, we've got companies pumping GMOs and chemicals into the food. And I mean, if you've ever watched, I still eat meat. I hate that I do. I wish I could convince myself sometime not to. But if you've ever watched those videos that show you how they treat cows and chickens, and it's insane what goes on this planet. Plain T.
Yeah.
It's insane what goes on here. And while this is all happening, we've got NASA worrying about these pretty pictures of Pluto 3 billion miles away. It's like, who gives a flying fuck?
Yeah,
like,
it's horrific.
Yeah, so
it really
it's
is
just
horrific.
It's sad because that's what I say when I don't like to get religious, but I think it's obvious to me that somebody wants to ruin what somebody put here. And you should be able to figure that out. And anybody who's an atheist needs to just think about why would we treat the earth this way? If you're an atheist and you don't believe in God, that's fine. But then why are these things more important? Why is space more important to NASA than the earth where we all live?
I think the answer to that is because their agenda is not to make mankind healthy, strong, wise, but they want to depopulate the earth because there's just too many of us and we're getting out of control.
Right.
So, and everything that you see indicates that. I mean, the crap that they put in our food, in our water, the fluoridation of water, the GMOs, all the toxins and poisons that they have, you know, the aluminum in the air, and of course Monsanto now comes out with seeds that are resistant to aluminum in the soil. You know, stuff like that. It's like, you know, it's so obvious when you really look at the big picture of what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it. Not only are they trying to kill off a great majority of the people on the planet, but they are trying to get filthy even richer while doing it. And to me, you know, people need to wake up and say, you know what, enough is enough. I'm not going to play this game anymore, and it is time for these people to go down in flames.
And it's not hard when you just look at pure numbers. I mean, I seriously don't know what I'll do if a Bush or a Clinton is elected. I will lose my mind because it just cannot happen, should not happen. And if we all just let it happen, it's like, then none of us, we all deserve to have it happen. You know, it's like, that is insanity that we let this keep going on, because there's 325 million of us in the United States and 4,000 of them. It is absolutely ridiculous. We should be able to just say, sorry, Washington, you're not in charge anymore. We moved the capital to Denver, Colorado. Bob's president.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and I'm seeing in the chat, you know, people are saying, well, where's the proof? Where's the proof? It's like, seriously, dude?
Proof of what?
Look around. The proof of the depopulation effort, I assume, is what he's talking about. Wow. And all the atrocities that are being, you know, committed against mankind while they're getting rich doing it. I mean, it's like, seriously, if you're asking me where the proof is, look around and look at what's going on the planet. And if you are too naive to be able to see that, then I don't know what to tell you. Because to me, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, it's like I said with the whole oil pipeline. Just think of that there's a pipeline that they built. Imagine the strength of the pipe that it would take to pump full oil from Canada all the way down to Texas so that they can make their big money on oil. And then something like water, which is needed for human beings here in California to live, because nobody knows how to desalinize the water with, at a cost-effective way yet. So we need water here. So rather than build a pipeline that would make sense for humanity, they instead keep this pipeline going that makes money for them, and they don't care about. They were dumping snow off the East Coast last week in the water. They're just dumping it because there's too much snow. And it's like, hello, California, over here. We could use some of that.
Have you seen the Air Force article where they're talking about owning the weather by 2021 or something like that?
No, I know that they can.
Yeah, that's already happening. And I mean, if they're owning it and they're using this technology, then why are they having California go through such a drought? And yes, I do believe that there's technologies to be able to do that. In fact, there's a guy named Tom Bearden, who is a ex-military colonel and a physicist who has gone into great detail about this type of scalar, not only weaponry, but scalar technology that can do just that, control the weather. And
I think that everything that's on the earth is like a sign for us of how things work, right? And I mean, when I take a shower, the top of the shower gets full of drops of water, right? And then when I get out of the shower, those drops of water fall back into the shower. That's the same way the earth works with humidity and heat rises, and that's how you get rain. I mean, they can today heat up the atmosphere enough that it rains in California. I know that they can do that. But of course, they're not going to. It's just they're not going to do it. They're going to save it for when they need it for whatever terrible plan they have next. But it's insane. It's absolutely sad. But my whole point was that we have all these NASA that cares about everything else in the world. They care about dinosaurs, and were dinosaurs warm-blooded? I saw another article the other day. Oh, now dinosaurs are warm-blooded. I swear in the last 4 years, they were warm, cold, feathered, unfeathered, and now they're warm. And somebody's taking the time to actually study all this when it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. What difference does it make? It doesn't make any difference in the world at all.
Distraction. It's distraction. It's just a technique. Shiny apple syndrome.
Yep. And putting money in the wrong place. So, I don't know. It just makes me sad, because that's why I want to go after this flat earth thing, because I really think if people were to wake up to obviously the biggest deception ever, to teach us all how stupid it was, how ancient of a belief it was, how big of idiots these ancient desert wandering Bible writers were to think that the earth was flat, to find out that that's in fact true is going to wake some people up to the fact of, somebody has an agenda here that is anti-human.
Yeah, and nobody ever seems to mention, they talk about, people were idiots by thinking that the earth was flat, but there are many other much more ancient models of cosmology, Vedic cosmology being one of them, where, talk about a whole different take altogether. That would be, and it's very interesting because the physics that they lay out in the Vedic cosmology actually is very plausible. So who's to say that model isn't right? Because the physics sure seem to add up to it, and there's I guess
we're not even allowed to explore anything else, because why would anybody look into it when they've already got all the answers?
Right. Well, then they don't want you to be able to choose between any other choices. It's kind of like the elections. You got right. Republican, you got Democrat. You don't vote that, you don't get a voice. Not that you ever had one in the first place.
No.
But there are so many other models that are plausible, and so much more plausible than the ball Earth model. So why aren't people actually looking at these as well?
And is flat Earth that stupid of a thought? Think about the fact that in the 1800s, science thought that the way you healed people from sickness was bloodletting, and this was a scientific belief, and we're talking the 1800s. So what's stupider, the the flat Earth, which everything we see says it's flat, and these people had they were able to predict eclipses. They were able to do a lot of the things, track the night skies, look at the building of the pyramids, things like that. These people were not stupid. They were not ancient wanderers like they tell us. And yet in 1800, science was doing things like bloodletting because they thought that's how you cured sickness. So, what is a really stupid thought? It's obvious that the flat Earth isn't that stupid.
Yeah. Jeran, have you ever seen an ancient tool called an astrolabe?
Yeah, I have. I've never seen one in person.
Oh, man. There's actually a TED Talk where a guy demonstrates them. And it's got to be one of the most amazing things I've ever seen at how
big was it, the one he had? It's
handheld. It's like the size of a Frisbee.
Yeah, there's huge ones too, I've seen.
There are, and they're very expensive, but you can make them out of paper. And he actually was talking about, he did for one of his master's thesis or something like that, he actually made one out of paper. But the things that you can predict, you can tell the time at night, at day, you can predict sunrise, you can predict planetary position, star position, and everything in this ancient tool. And of course, it's very much based off of, it was invented in a time when people thought the Earth was flat, and it's based on that supposition, and it works perfectly still to this day. So wow. If anybody has never seen an astrolabe, look it up sometime. They're remarkable. They really are.
Yeah, they're incredible things. Yeah, that's awesome. But and another thing I wanted to tell everybody, if people are still listening, I don't even know, that I've actually been working with this guy who emailed me. At first, I was apprehensive about even talking to him, and we kind of started to talk because what he believes is that they've added 1,000 years to our timeline, which sounds crazy. But when you start to look at it, and he started to bring some proof, and I've started to look into it, I was actually going to do a video on it, because I do think it's not so much important because there's nothing we can do about it now. But the whole idea of the Dark Ages is just not in line with who human beings are. If you think about, they basically have said from 400 to 1400 that nothing happened, that people went into the Dark Ages, they went back to caves, and there was no science and there was no math, and it just isn't realistic. When you think about human beings, they always want to do more. They always want to learn. They always want to grow. They always want to figure things out. So to just think that for 1,000 years we just all went into caves and just didn't worry about anything is not really doesn't really jive. And some of these proofs are pretty significant as far as tracking some of these kings and queens back. They all go back about 1,000 years and just stop. You look at what the Catholic Church did as far as going through the Inquisition and getting rid of books, and the whole idea of the Library of Alexandria burning down. A lot of these things that we're told about Eratosthenes and all these things come from other sources. Like, we've lost all their writings, but then you have Ptolemy or somebody like that in 200 or 300 says, well, so-and-so said this 500 years ago, and so-and-so said this 400 years ago. So when you really start to put it all together, it could be possible that the deception goes even deeper than most people would want to think. And so I am going to do a video about it because it really helped me see that this may be even more diabolical than I thought, that they really have created for themselves the world that they pretend they're in.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly. And that kind of stuff still goes on, to this day, about what they tell us. They would have us believe that the ancients were just, utter morons and didn't know anything, when in fact anybody, even upon the most cursory of examination of these things, finds that they really had a great deal of knowledge, much more so than the average person knows about today. And they still use those techniques, as a divide and conquer type mechanism. For example, we're told on a daily basis about how all these terrorists are Arabs and they hate our freedom and they want to kill us because they don't like the fact that we have all this freedom in the United States. And, I look at people and I don't see them as inherently evil. I'm sorry, everybody will say that. It's like, no, the Arabs, they have kids, they get up, they do their thing every day, they love their kids, they love their relatives. To just make the assumption that they hate everybody and that they're our enemies because they hate our freedom is nothing more than a divide and conquer technique. And it's been used on us, since, it is. It's been used on us since time immemorial, for the Hegelian dialect, which ultimately equates to divide and conquer, by creating these crazy situations, problem, reaction, solution type thing. And,
I would even almost go a step further in the fact that since I didn't do a lot on Facebook before, but since I have a Facebook account for the last 3 or 4 months, as far as for the flat earth part, I've had so many people from every country contact me, and they are absolutely the most genuine, nice, friendly, open, loving people. Peace be with you. And I mean, they're unbelievable. I would dare say much, much better than Americans. I mean, I'll get people that'll just message me out of nowhere and tell me that I need to burn in gas chamber, or I need to, out of nowhere. Like, you don't know me to say that. And these other people from these countries that I'm told hate my guts and want to come over and fly planes into my buildings. And it's absolute nonsense. There's not anybody who wants to do that, the way they describe it. It's insane.
Yeah, the whole notion of 19 hijackers with box cutters, breaking down the most powerful military in the world and getting through our security is just patently absurd.
Yeah, into the Pentagon, of course, the #1 most protected spot that there is.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you a no-planer, as they call them?
I am. I believe that Simon on Clues Forum in the movie September Clues did a fantastic job of exposing the video trickery that Fox was largely responsible for as the master feed. Mm-hmm. But I mean, many people, many of the eyewitnesses that, of course, didn't make airtime were saying that no, these were missiles that appeared to have hit these buildings. And then when you look at the physics of the official explanation of the pancake effect and how these things, the jet fuel supposedly weakened the steel, which then in turn caused the pancake effect of one floor falling down onto another. Well, the problem with that is if you time the collapse of the buildings, they come down in something like 10.2 and 10.4 seconds respectively, which is free fall. And there's only one way that can happen. And that's to remove any obstruction from below it by demolishing it. So I mean, all you have to do is just look at the very simplest of physics facts to debunk it, and then of course it just gets deeper and deeper from there because the lie gets more and more elaborate. But Simon did a fantastic job.
That's what did it for me. Actually, was when I found that video. It really, I mean, I knew there was something up. I was already discovering the amount of gold that was basically stolen from underneath in the vaults, and I was already onto that. But I had heard people say no planes, and I said, "Oh my goodness, you guys you're getting out of your minds." And when I saw that video, he did an excellent job. That is the best video out there, and I often use it with people now that want to debate me about flat Earth or something. I'll just say, "Just tell me this: did a plane hit the Pentagon?" And I live it there. Absolutely. What do you think? Lizard men did it? Like, I won't even talk to you. It's like you have shut off your brain to reality. You simply think that whatever comes out of Washington is reality.
Exactly. It's funny. It's funny because, one of the things that they showed us, and then they covered it up right away, was when the plane came out the other side perfectly intact of the World Trade Center. And you're going, really? A tin can went through all that steel and came out very clearly on the other side intact. And so what they did is they put a banner up to cover that up because it was, it was a factor that got out of their control. I guess what had happened is that there was a gust of wind and it actually blew the chopper to the side, and it kind of screwed up its perspective on what it was supposed to be. And as a result of it, the CGI came out the other side, and the only way they could fix that at the time was to just put a banner over the top of it and say, look, see? So,
but I think it's important for people to see that because, I mean, I don't watch any news as far as CNN, Fox, because now I know that they all are working an agenda, and they're owned by the rich and powerful who are working with those behind the hoaxes. And it's important that you see that, because there's no other way what happened on 9/11 could have happened without the help of the media. And somebody had those tapes in their hands before anything happened and was able to pop the tape in and pretend it was live. And we just kept hearing, it's all those psychological techniques that they've learned years and years ago, like to say bin Laden, terrorists, war on terror, bin Laden, over and over again. Here's an interesting story. My brother was he's in the Navy still, 40 year or 37 years in the Navy, whatever it is. And he was on the aircraft carrier where they dumped bin Laden's body. So I asked him, well, what happened? Did you get to see it? And he said, oh yeah, the helicopter came down and landed right on the thing, and they pulled out a box out of the helicopter. I said, okay. And then I said, well, then what happened? You guys got to see it get dumped over? He says, oh, no. They shut down the whole ship. Like, what do you mean? He says, they sent everybody to their room on lockdown. And I said, what do you mean everybody? He says, they sent every single person on the entire, you're talking 3,000 naval officers, all getting sent to their rooms, put on lockdown so that they could dump the body of bin Laden off a boat. Like, yeah. And he's such a believer. He believes that that's what they did. I'm like, John, you got to be kidding me, dude. You really think that they would send you all to He's like, well, they wanted to give him a proper burial at sea. Like, the guy who killed supposedly 3,000 Americans,
like he deserved it, right?
Like they care about his. They're waterboarding people to get to him, and then when they get to him, they give him a proper burial. It's like, give me a break. I mean, things like that are just, it's outrageous, and there's so many people that just will. I really think they've shut off their brains to just thinking. Common sense tells you something.
Did you see some of the bin Laden doppelgangers that they had, like reading the terror notes?
Yeah, I mean, they're so bad.
Absolutely not even the same person, not even in the same universe was it the same person.
Not even close. And like they couldn't tell that. It's the same thing with, I was a big one saying that James Foley that was killed. And, I don't like to say that because I'm not saying he's not dead. He might be, but the whole beheading videos are like, we're supposed to believe that these guys in black masks are so evil, they're so diabolical, but they don't ever cut heads off on camera. Like, they'll threaten Obama, they'll threaten us, and then right before they cut the head, they cut the video and then come back when the head's just bloody and sitting on the back. It's like, come on, guys. Like, I mean, if they're this diabolical, they would do it right in front of your face.
Yes.
It's
well, even in that, what was it, that Charlie Hebdo thing that was going on over in France? If you saw that footage, it was crazy because, the one shot where the guy runs up and
on the
sidewalk and he shoots him, right? And it's like, it's a blank. Nothing happens.
Yeah, he just shot him right in the back and then he... It's so sad. I mean, it's really, the whole thing with Sandy Hook is such a joke.
Yeah, it is.
It's sad. It's just, and the thing is, you can't blame them for keep doing it because 90% of the country falls for it.
Yes.
Just buys it hook, line, and sinker, and you're a crazy tinfoil hat wearer if you think otherwise. And it's like,
and it's very clear to me that they're trying to destroy not only the First Amendment, but the Second Amendment as well.
Yep.
And historically, every country that has been disarmed has experienced, a level of nearly flat out genocide by their governments.
Right.
It's just, it's unreal. And people will sit there and they will say, oh yeah, I'm a conspiracy theorist. They are waking up to all of these atrocious things that are going on around the world. And yet, you hit them with the flat earth subject and it's just too far. It's too far over the line to even consider looking at the evidence. And I have to admit, I was in the same boat. 3-4 months ago, I would have never in a million years even considered this probably.
Yeah, I told you, I told my wife to shut the F up.
Yeah.
Right. And acted just like everybody acts. I said, how would a plane go around the world? Just yelling at her because we had decided to start over and she just happened to kind of pull out do you think there's a chance that the earth is flat? And I would flipped out.
Yeah.
But, it didn't take very long to just, one thing leads to another. And if you really look into it, and I don't mean go to comments and challenge people over and over again about, well, how does this work? Well, what about the eclipse? Well, what about this? And what about gravity and this? I'm not saying that. That's not how I came to my conclusion, and that's not how Bob came to his conclusion. I guarantee it. It takes a little bit of self-thought, self-critical thinking to really just lay it out there for yourself. Go do your own investigations, and you will see there's a major problem with what we're told is fact.
Yes, very much so. And even, and when I was looking at this model, and I noticed that Stephen Christ is in the chat room here.
Oh, I don't even have the thing up on the screen anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching him, and honestly, Stephen, I've looked at your model, and I have to admit it has a lot of merit. It really does. There are a few things, however, that don't quite bind for me, and but I'm still looking. I'm still looking at it. I'm still giving it its due consideration, no matter the fact that, honestly, Stephen, I mean, you kind of lose a little credibility by pretending to be the Lord, and that's great, because I believe that we're all God. God is within every one of us. However, I just can't quite follow what you're saying there. But I do appreciate your model. I appreciate your graphics and the intense amount of work that you go through to demonstrate your point, and there is a lot of validity to it. I personally am not quite there yet, but I also have not ruled it out either.
And I actually agree with Stephen when he says we need to retest the rectilineator, because I totally agree. But I think that for me personally, Stephen, when I actually came to you, and I don't know if you remember, but it was January, somewhere in there, and I came to you when I was looking, and because your model did make a lot of sense to me, other than the fact that I don't believe in gravity. So that was the only thing that I was asking you, and you basically just said, this is the truth, and flat Earth is stupid, and left it at that. You never would explain to me anything, any part of it. So to me, I do need a little bit more than just being told that flat Earth is stupid, because it's not. I mean,
yeah, we hear that enough from the ball earthers.
Yeah. So I'm wondering what Stephen thinks. Stephen, when I go and measure 8 miles tonight, what would be the anticipated results if we were concave? Because I don't really understand how that would work. You're saying that maybe, I don't know. Do you understand how that would work, Bob?
Well, no. I mean, he's saying that the Earth, that the curve is actually up, obviously, and one could argue that there is empirical evidence, and in fact, we were talking about it earlier, that would tend to support that. When we look out at the ocean and we see the ocean rise to our eye level to the point where it almost looks like a tsunami. So in that regard, you could say, well, there's empirical evidence to support that supposition. However, there are some other factors to that model that just don't quite jive for me yet. So, I'm not sure what he would say.
He just said right now that Tesla said that gravity was fake, which I believe too. So how does he think people are standing up above us if there's no gravity? I'm even more confused.
That's one of those anomalies that I don't understand either.
Yeah. See, and that's what I like about the flat Earth model, is there is no need for gravity in my book, because there's nothing that needs to have. I mean, they say, well, how does the moon and the sun stay up if there's no gravity? Well, I don't believe that they're actually floating orbs up in nothingness. So to me, I don't need to explain that. What is it?
Yeah, how do you explain the Southern Cross dilemma?
So I don't know if you mean that people in South America and people in Australia both can see the Southern Cross at the same time. Is that what you're talking about? The rectilineator is a test that was done basically, well, there's another one that's done with the orbs, with the plumb bobs, but the rectilineator is a huge contraption that basically you measure out each section of it. Say you put 6-foot sections every 6 feet. Then if you spread this thing out, it would be able to tell you by the differential in each pole. Let's say each pole is 6 foot tall and 6 foot across from another pole. Well, if you kept adjusting them as you went down a huge stretch, it would show you whether or not that those things went up or down. And the reclinator showed that they went up, meaning that the Earth was a bowl shape. But then again, you could find any part of land, and it could be a bowl shape, right? And go to a meteor crater, and you would have a bowl shape. So that doesn't really, I mean, do we see that on the water? Is there a way to measure that on water? I mean, I like the model. I do. I think some of your graphics are awesome, but to just say that everything turns inside a ball, now you're saying that gravity is causing people to stay stuck to the top of the ball on the inside and stuck to the side. And
maybe in his model, it's, there's a centrifugal element, like maybe the outside of the ball that we're inside of is spinning, and thus the centrifugal force is holding us to the inside. I don't know.
Okay,
but,
well, Stephen said that they can see that. See, what I go for at this point then is I'll try and ask people to get me photographs of that, because is that actually being seen, or is just somebody saying that it's being seen? I mean, I can go to that. Can I share screen here? I'll go to my little planetary thing here. Oh, now that will show it though, because that's going to take the ball model. See, that's the one thing that when I used to draw the flat Earth map for myself, Bob, the one thing that I could never jive with is the fact that they have Australia on the complete opposite end from South America. Because if they're both south, then they would both have basically the same view of the sky, right? And so my whole thought was that, well, we don't know what the layout of the land is. And actually, I was able to fix it by bringing the land masses almost around to the point where they were almost, how do I describe it? Kind of stretching it in so that Australia came closer to Africa, which came closer to South America. Kind of like a distortion, because it won't work if they actually see that in the sky, of course. I mean, you can't, I've never been there. I've never been south enough to see that. If it does happen, though, that does not jive with the flat Earth model. But, I mean, like I told you, Christopher, before, when I said, when you were making coins of me and dropping me in toilets and everything else, I said, dude, why don't we just continue doing what we're doing by attacking NASA and bringing the attention of the deception there to light, and you would cuss me out and tell me you're going to send me to FEMA camps. So
yeah, by attacking each other, all that does is just, diminishes both models.
Right.
Because, it's a typical divide and conquer type thing. You get the infighting going, like with Eric Dubé and his and everybody's a shill, and Mark Sargent's a shill, and this, that. It's ridiculous, because it really hurts this movement more than anything. Yes, there are different models out there, and I'm certainly not about to say that Stephen Christ's model is dead wrong, or that the flat Earth is dead right. I happen to believe that the flat Earth model is more viable, but again, like I said, I have not stopped considering what Stephen is saying. Any more than I would stop considering what Mark Sargent is saying just because Eric Dubé labels him as a shill. I mean,
right.
we have to be united on this. We have to, bring these differences together in a very controlled and civil type of forum, and, stop the name calling, this is a shill, you're a shill, or, making childish things like, coins with your picture on it, Jeran, going down a tube, which I thought was a little on the juvenile side.
Well, and then one time he actually said that when he gets crowned as Christ, which I'm not holding my breath, when he gets crowned as Christ, the first people he's going to go after are the flat earthers. That's going to be his number. Like, I guess we just forget about the fact that for 400 years, science lied and called it a globe. Like, now it's more important that a couple people came along and pointed out the flaws of NASA and said that it's a flat Earth. It's just those kind of things to me are such a turnoff because it's like, what are you doing? I mean, the first people that should be hung in this whole thing would be NASA and people that know exactly what the Earth looks like, know exactly what shape we are, know exactly how the land masses are, all these things that we try to figure out and we argue about. Think about it. NASA knows. NASA knows right now and could end all these debates and end it all in a second. And they just keep lying and taking money and lying and taking money. And it's just crazy because I think we should all have come together and said, let's get rid of the liars and then we'll figure out what the shape is. But we can't fight between each other. It's the whole thing, like you said, with Eric Dubay. That thing saddened me more than anything else that's happened because if there's anybody who my views almost fall directly in line with, it's Eric Dubay. And
mine too.
Yeah. And I mean, so it was, and for me, I actually looked at him as somebody who looked at evidence, looked at things face value and really studied them. And he even says on, his interviews and things of how important it is that nobody says something unless they have facts, unless they can back it up. And then he gets told by somebody that I stole $80,000 and within an hour is posting it all over the internet and calling me a shill and a thief. And that just, what a turnoff, because I know the guy's a good investigator. I know the guy's smart and he just chose and made an incorrect assessment about me. But it's, that hurt the movement, in my opinion. I think Eric and I could have done things together that would have been great, but not now because I can't trust him.
Exactly. I actually wrote him a letter a couple weeks ago. I don't think I told you about this yet. It kind of explaining my viewpoint of the fact that he really hurt the flat Earth movement by calling you out as a shill for the extremely weak reasons that he did. And I told him, basically that I had gotten to know you, and he has never responded, by the way, but I had gotten to know you and that it was my opinion that you were absolutely sincere about exposing this and you were truly trying to seek out the truth. And that, I thought, in my opinion, that he should try and reconcile things with you and pull that whole jeranism as a raging shill thread off of Vipers, because it was just ridiculous. And all it did was cause a huge division in the flat Earth movement or any other model other than ball Earth, and it just hurt everybody. And and I discussed a few, I mentioned a few other things about his latest video and stuff like that. But it's not right that he's doing this with all these people that are genuinely interested in calling out NASA. And no matter what the model is, the point is we've all been lied to,
Right.
And that's first and foremost. What the model is after that, I'm sure that we could civilly, take these viewpoints under consideration and, scrutiny, give them their due, their due scrutiny and get through this. But I think we're all in agreement that the ball Earth model is just ridiculous.
Right. I wish we would have gone that direction because it didn't matter. I understand where he's coming from, where he thinks that, well, if Mark says that, the heat comes from underneath the Earth or whatever, which could be the truth or could not. But he says that that's such a big deal because then when people come into the movement, they're going to see something dumb like that and just leave. If that's the case, then they're not ready for this anyway. It's not something that, think of how many things you've heard in the past 3 months. We've all been told 1,000 things that are wrong. And it's a proof that you have a brain when you can take information in, put it through a filter and spit out the shit and keep what works and keep moving on from there. And that's a sign of a good investigator. That's a sign of a good researcher. And to just discount everybody as basically idiots by saying that if they come into this movement and they dare hear Mark Sargent say from a gaming standpoint, I think it's funny that he says that. I don't take what he says and say, oh no, now this is really stupid, I'm out of here. And I don't think, and anybody who does, I wouldn't want them to be in the movement anyway. I really think that we could have all got together and said, let's bring the points that we all believe are facts regarding the ball not being truth and attack those, go at those, convince people that this is wrong, what we've been taught is false. And then from there, then we can start looking at all these different ideas. But to just say that, I mean, for him to think that we're so far along in the movement, we're a tiny little YouTube community of, I mean, my videos get 5,000 views. There's 350 million people just in America. I mean,
I know.
That's a half of a half of a half of a half of a percent. We're nowhere near a place where a shill would even do anything.
And isn't it amazing, Jeran, the sheer amount of shills that are assigned to anybody that's promoting this model?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Look at the forum that's you know, the Research Society or whatever the hell that place is, where you've got guys over there with 7,000 posts who will just run every ball earth fact down your throat if you go over there. It's insane. It's like, okay.
And you have to wonder about that. It's like, you know, okay, if we weren't getting traction, or if this model was so unbelievably unviable, then why are these people coming around and they spend, I mean, every single day they're there. You know, you see them in the comments. They are there, you know, saying, oh yeah, show me this, show me that, prove to me this, prove to me that, totally being disruptive. And you know they're being paid. And I don't know if anybody's ever seen like somebody did a video on basically I was once a shill, a paid shill, and they spelled out very clearly, you know, how they operate, how they come about, you know, getting recruited into that job. And you know, once you understand that, and I think that we should find that video and actually post it so that people can identify these people.
Well, you know, that might be the problem though, because Eric says he was contacted to be a shill. So I'm
really?
wondering,
I didn't know that.
yeah, if you listen to his, he did an interview. He did the Baller Skeptics last week.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
The week before or something. And he actually talks about being approached and being told that he would have his own TV show, and they would give him the information he was allowed to release. Basically, he could keep talking about kind of the same direction, but they would tell him where he could go and where he couldn't go. So I think that once you've been approached like that, well, then it kind of makes sense to where he's got this shield up to where anybody who deviates from the path that he thinks they should take. So to him, he saw me and said, okay, Jeran needs to immediately recognize Mark as a shill. And because I didn't and said, no, I'm going to do his interview, I'm going to do his show, I'm going to wait till I see something glaring, he just knew that at that point he was like, oh, Jeran went off track, then he's a shill. So I could see where he was coming from, but on the other hand, it's like reading that forum that you told me to go to. There's those guys over there are basically saying I'm being paid by NASA to make it look like anybody who believes that NASA's bullshit also believes in the flat Earth.
Right.
And that
discrediting by association.
Right, which may actually be true, everything except for the fact that I've never talked to anybody from NASA and I received no money from them. But I mean, I could see where maybe they would let the flat Earth out for that reason. Like basically they know they're at the end of their rope, right?
Right.
Like they really
There's
can't
got to be a
else.
fall guy.
Right. So they kind of said, well, let's buy another year by letting the flat Earth information out. So, I mean, I could see where they're coming from because some of it makes sense. But on the other hand, like I said, if Eric had done any actual research into what he claimed I stole or done, you know, or asked me, he would have gotten the answer that would have protected at least a friendship or a camaraderie, rather than even that he gives me money to do the test and then a day before the test says I steal money. I mean, that discredited the test, which went well for 4 miles and was proof that there was no curve in the 4 miles, and could have gone a lot better because he has that kind of traction that could have put out that video and you know had another 10 or 20,000 people see it than did. So it's unfortunate because like I said, I had a lot of respect for him as a researcher, and now I have none because he either took somebody's word for it and went public with it, or did no research on his own and went public with it. And those are two things that I think are bad signs. I mean, if I did that to somebody else, I would hope that they would see that as the same thing, that, hey, Jeran's talking about, you know, opening his mind and looking at the facts and doing the studies and doing the research, and he's just getting information from other people and immediately throwing it out there as fact. You know, I don't do that. You know, I try and make sure that anything that I say, at the very least, I believe. You know, like I said, with this guy talking about a missing 1,000 years in history, I've been talking to him for almost 2 months because I needed to work on it myself. It wasn't just, hey, this guy has all these great facts, I'm going to do a video. It was, this guy has all these great facts, I need to start researching it. And unfortunately, right now, I've got a lot of other research on my plate to where that's not the, you know, the biggest thing I'm looking at. So at least I'm not coming out and just saying things that I'm being given or that I don't believe in myself. And so that's what upset me, because I think that he did hurt the movement, and we'll recover because the truth has to come out eventually. You know, it's gonna, hopefully I'm just surprised by how hard it is to get through people's heads. Like I said, the science community, I understand. I mean, Bob, you shocked me by coming so quickly, you know, and realizing it and hearing, you know, your past jobs and you know, your high level of intellectualism. Kind of, that's the kind of people that I would expect to have a problem with. But the people on YouTube that are just popping into different videos, and what are they even watching the videos for anyway? Some guy the other day said, you just wasted 43 minutes of my entire life and proved nothing. I was like, well, dude, I've never wasted 4 minutes on a video in my entire life, because when I got to the 4 minutes in, I turn it off.
Exactly.
It's like, what are you doing listening to my video for 44 minutes if it's all nonsense? You know, it's crazy. It's like, these are the guys, they'll just keep arguing. It's like, what are you doing? Like, I don't need you to be a cheerleader for them when you don't even understand anything other than they told us so it's true.
Exactly.
That's their facts. So anyway.
So yeah, okay. It's pretty amazing. Well, we've been on here for almost 3 hours, so
I got to go anyway because we've got to leave in the next 15 or 20 minutes if we're going to get there by 8.
Okay.
So yeah, and then I will have the video going for you, and so expect me between 8 and 8:30. I'll post a video right now that shows the link to the Ustream. And someone wanted to know if you're going to download, if you're going to upload. Yeah, the video will be uploaded. If somebody asked if this video would be uploaded, it'll be, I think it gets uploaded as soon as I hit stop. Never done it before, so we will find out. Bob, yes. It was fun.
Yes, well, thank you very much. I enjoyed it, and you know, hopefully we can do it again.
We'll talk soon because we'll figure out a day that maybe you can do it, and we'll keep it to an hour or something just to kind of recap the past week or something.
Exactly. Sounds good, man.
I'll talk to you in a little bit.
Okay. Have a good one. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for bearing with us. I'll figure out a way to make it easier for people to ask questions or do it differently, or we'll see if you guys liked it. And this video should be up right after. And you'll also see another video saying that I'll be going live like in an hour and a half. And that will have the link to the Ustream. Okie dokie. Don't lie to each other. And all that fun stuff. Stay flat. Peace.
Peace.